My wife said, "Stop introducing me as your wife. It makes me look like I settled." I replied, "Good to know." That evening, I quietly removed my name from every loan, mortgage she had added me to. 2 days later, she walked into a brunch with her friends. And the moment she saw what was placed at her seat, she forgot how to breathe. The rain had started just as I pulled into the driveway. Not the romantic kind you see in movies. The kind that drummed against the windshield like impatient fingers, blurring the warm light spilling from our kitchen window into something that looked almost apologetic. I sat there for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled, watching that light, wondering if the woman inside still recognized the man who'd fought rush hour traffic to get home to her. 7 years. That's how long we'd been married. Long enough to know each other's coffee orders by heart. Long enough to finish each other's sentences. Long enough, I thought, to have built something unshakable. But lately I'd begun to notice the small erosions. The way Claire would turn her phone face down when I entered a room. The way her laughter at dinner parties never quite reached me anymore, saved instead for colleagues whose names I was beginning to know too well. The way she'd started saying I instead of we when talking about the future. But nothing had prepared me for what she said that evening. I remember the exact placement of everything on that table. The ceramic bowl of pasta primavera she'd made, steam still rising in lazy spirals. The bottle of Pinot Grigio we'd bought on our anniversary trip to Napa, half empty now, the label peeling slightly at one corner. The linen napkins her mother had given us as a wedding gift, monogrammed with our intertwined initials. I remember thinking how strange it was that objects could outlast the feelings that had prompted their purchase. Claire had been talking about the firm's holiday party, something about the venue, the caterer, the politics of the seating arrangement. I was only half listening, my mind still at the office where I'd spent the last 3 months working 70-hour weeks to close the Meridian deal. The deal that would finally push us past the financial threshold we'd been chasing. The deal that was supposed to change everything. "Marcus will be there, of course," she was saying, her fork making precise, delicate movements through the pasta. "And Diane, probably the whole executive team." "Mm-hmm," I replied, reaching for the wine. "I was thinking," she continued, and something in her tone made me look up. Her eyes were fixed on her plate, but there was a tightness around her mouth I'd learned to recognize. "About introductions." "Introductions?" "Yes." She set down her fork with a soft clink that somehow sounded too loud. I think I think it would be better if you didn't introduce me as your wife." The rain seemed to get louder. Or maybe that was just my pulse in my ears. "I'm sorry." At the party, and in general, really. She was still looking at her plate, pushing a piece of zucchini from one side to the other. "It makes me look like I settled." If you've ever had one of those moments where time seems to stutter, where your brain tries to process information that doesn't fit any category you have, you'll understand what happened next. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just sat there, wine glass halfway to my lips, trying to understand how 7 years of marriage could be reduced to a status that made her look diminished. "Claire," I finally managed, setting the glass down carefully. Too carefully. "What are you talking about?" She sighed, the sound of someone explaining something obvious to someone slow. "It's not personal, David. It's just optics. When you introduce me as your wife, it puts me in this box. Like my identity is defined by being married to you. People at the firm, they need to see me as Claire Morrison, senior associate, not as David's wife, who also happens to work in law." "You took my last name," I said quietly. "Claire Morrison. That was your choice." "I know, and I'm not saying I regret it. I'm just saying that in professional context, the wife title, it carries implications." "Implications?" "Yes. Like I needed marriage to legitimize me. Like I'm not enough on my own." I looked at her then, really looked at her. At the woman I'd proposed to on a beach in Maui, both of us sunburned and laughing, her yes coming before I'd even finished the question. At the woman who'd cried in my arms the night her father died, who'd held my hand through every setback and celebrated every victory. At the woman who now sat across from me, telling me that being called my wife made her look small. "Good to know," I said. 2 words. Quiet. Calm. But they felt like drawing a line in sand that was already washing away. She looked up then, confusion flickering across her face. What? I said, good to know. I stood, picking up my plate, the pasta I'd barely touched, suddenly nauseating. Thanks for clarifying. David, don't be dramatic. I'm just trying to. I'm not being dramatic, Claire. You've made your position clear. You don't want to be associated with me in a way that might make you look less impressive. I understand completely. That's not what But I was already walking toward the kitchen, the sound of my footsteps on the hardwood floor marking out a rhythm I'd walked thousands of times before. Only this time, each step felt like crossing into foreign territory. I spent the rest of the evening in my study. Not working, I couldn't focus. Just sitting in the leather chair her parents had given us when I made partner, staring at the wall where we'd hung our wedding photos. There's one I'd always loved, us dancing at the reception, her head thrown back in laughter, my hands at her waist, both of us looking at each other like we'd just discovered something miraculous. When had that stopped? When had I become someone whose association diminished rather than enhanced? Or had I always been, and I'd just been too in love to notice? Around midnight, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. Soft, hesitant, the kind of steps someone makes when they're not sure if they want to be heard. My study door was ajar, and I knew she could see me there, lit by the desk lamp, surrounded by shadows and second-guessing. She didn't come in. After a moment, I heard her continue down the hall to our bedroom. Our bedroom. I wondered how long it would be before that hour started feeling as outdated as my wife apparently did. I didn't follow her. Instead, I opened my laptop. The blue light illuminated my face as I began to navigate to folders I hadn't looked at in years. Financial documents, mortgage papers, loan agreements, the infrastructure of our shared life, all the invisible scaffolding we'd built together. Or more accurately, that I'd built while she climbed. Because here's what Claire didn't know, what she'd never bothered to ask about in her rush to establish her independence. Every major asset she had was co-signed by me. The house in Thornfield Estates, the one she loved to host parties in, the one with the chef's kitchen and the infinity pool. I was on that mortgage. The Tesla she drove to the firm every day, my name on that loan. Even the investment property we'd bought 3 years ago, the one that was supposed to be our retirement nest egg, co-signed. She'd needed my credit score, my income, my signature on every dotted line. Because Claire, for all her brilliance as a lawyer, had student loans that stretched to the horizon and a credit history that read like a cautionary tale about impulse purchases and minimum payments. But I'd never mentioned it, never held it over her, because that's what you do when you love someone. You lift them up, you lend them your strength. You put your name on the line because you're betting on a future where the line between yours and mine dissolves entirely. Apparently, I bet wrong. I opened the mortgage document first, read through it with the careful attention I'd learned in business school, noting every clause, every contingency, every escape hatch built into the legal language. Then I opened my email. The cursor blinked at me. Waiting. I've always believed that revenge is a dish best served cold, but that's not quite right. Revenge isn't about temperature, it's about clarity. It's about the moment when emotion crystallizes into action, when hurt transforms into precision. I wasn't angry. That would come later. In that moment, I was simply awake. I began to type. The first email went to James Corrigan, our real estate attorney. Professional, courteous, requesting information about the process for removing a co-signor from a mortgage, the legal requirements, the timeline, the documentation needed. The second went to Susan Park at the bank. Similar tone, inquiring about my options regarding the auto loan, whether there were penalties for early removal of a co-signor, whether refinancing would be necessary. The third went to my accountant. A general question about asset separation, tax implications, how to cleanly divide commingled finances. I sent them all, heard the soft whoosh of each email departing, felt something in my chest that wasn't quite satisfaction but wasn't pain either. Just a sense of gears beginning to turn, of consequences being set in motion. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the darkness, listening to the rain that had now settled into a steady rhythm against the windows. thinking about how easily we can wound the people who love us, how carelessly we can dismiss the sacrifices they've made, how quickly we can become I when ambition outgrows gratitude. Claire wanted to be seen as someone who hadn't settled. Fine. I'd make sure everyone could see exactly what she'd built on her own versus what she'd built on borrowed ground. The clock on the wall ticked past 1 a.m. Somewhere above me, my wife, Claire Morrison, senior associate, was sleeping. Probably peaceful. Probably already planning how to introduce herself at the holiday party without the encumbrance of a husband. I wondered what she'd say 2 days from now when she walked into that brunch with her friends. The monthly gathering she attended religiously at the terrace, that overpriced bistro with the Instagram-worthy mimosas and the wait list that stretched for weeks. I wondered what her face would look like when she saw what I'd arranged to have waiting at her seat. The rain finally began to let up around 2. By then, I'd made 11 more phone calls to voicemail boxes, sent 7 more emails, and created a detailed spreadsheet of every financial entanglement that bore my name alongside hers. I'd also drafted a document. Nothing illegal, nothing cruel, just a simple statement of fact, printed on good cardstock, sealed in an envelope with her name written in my careful handwriting. In 48 hours, that envelope would be placed at her usual seat at the terrace. Her friends would watch her open it, would see her face change, would ask questions she wouldn't be able to answer without admitting things she'd worked very hard to keep hidden. And I would be nowhere nearby, just a man going about his Saturday, perhaps getting coffee, perhaps reading the paper, perhaps finally breathing fully for the first time in months. Because Claire was right about one thing: words matter, titles matter, how we introduce ourselves to the world matters. And I was about to introduce her to a reality where settled would be the least of her concerns. The dawn came slowly, gray and reluctant. I heard Claire's alarm go off at 6:30, heard her moving around upstairs, getting ready for work, heard her heels clicking down the stairs, the jangle of her keys, the sound of the garage door opening. She didn't call out goodbye. I sat in my study and waited for the house to fall silent. Then I picked up my phone and made one more call. Mark, it's David. Yeah, I know it's early. Listen, about that brunch reservation for Saturday at the terrace, the one under Claire's name, I need you to do something for me. The words came easily, too easily. Maybe that should have worried me. It didn't. The office felt different that morning, or maybe I was different. And the office was just the same glass and steel monument to ambition it had always been. I stood at my window on the 43rd floor, watching the city wake up below me, and tried to remember the last time I'd looked at this view without thinking of it as ours. Our city, our building, our carefully constructed life. Now it was just a city, just a building, just my life, singular, being quietly dismantled and rebuilt. My phone had started buzzing before I even reached the office. James Corrigan, the real estate attorney, had replied at 6:45 a.m. Either the man never slept, or my inquiry had struck him as interesting enough to warrant an early response. Knowing James, probably both. David, intriguing questions. Can we meet today? I have some thoughts on your situation that would be better discussed in person. How's 2 p.m.? JC. Susan from the bank had been almost as prompt. Mr. Morrison, I've reviewed your accounts. We should definitely talk. I can have Patrick from our legal department join us if you'd like. This afternoon? Even my accountant, usually reliable for a 48-hour turnaround, had responded within 3 hours. David, call me when you have a moment. There are several strategies we should discuss, some of them time-sensitive. I scheduled them all. James at 2, Susan at 4, my accountant Richard at 6:30 over dinner at Marcello's, the Italian place near his office where we'd celebrated the closing of my first major deal, where Claire and I had celebrated our 3rd anniversary, where I now sat alone, apparently, celebrating the deconstruction of everything I'd built. The irony wasn't lost on me. Jennifer knocked on my door at 8:15, my assistant's perpetually cheerful face appearing in the gap. Morning, David. Coffee's ready. Also, you have that conference call with the Meridian people at 9, and Catherine wants to see you about the Hendricks contract before then. And your wife called. I looked up from my laptop. When? About 10 minutes ago. I told her you were in early prep for the call. She said it wasn't urgent. Jennifer hesitated, her expression shifting into something that looked almost concerned. She sounded, I don't know, off maybe? Should I have interrupted you? No, I said, turning back to my screen. You did fine. If she calls again, same protocol. Jennifer lingered for a moment, and I could feel the question she wasn't asking. In the 3 years she'd worked for me, she'd gotten used to the rhythm of my marriage. The lunch deliveries Claire would send on stressful days. The way I'd always take her calls, even in meetings. The framed photo on my desk of the two of us in Santorini, sunburned and smiling. The Aegean impossibly blue behind us. That photo was face down now. I'd turned it over this morning without really thinking about it. The same way you might close a book you're not ready to finish but can't keep reading. Is everything okay? Jennifer finally asked. I looked at her then, this young woman who'd seen me at my best and worst, who'd covered for me during Claire's father's funeral, who'd somehow always known when I needed space versus when I needed someone to just sit in the office and pretend everything was normal. No, I said honestly, but it will be. She nodded, accepting this, and quietly closed the door. The morning proceeded with mechanical efficiency. The Meridian call went well. They were ready to sign, just needed a few minor adjustments to the timeline. Catherine's concerns about the Hendricks contract were easily addressed. I reviewed 3 proposals, approved 2 expense reports, and responded to 47 emails. I did not call my wife back. At 1:30, I left the office and walked the 6 blocks to James Corrigan's firm. The weather had cleared overnight, leaving behind one of those crisp autumn days that makes you believe in fresh starts and clean slates. The kind of day that appears in movies right before the protagonist makes a life-changing decision. All golden light and meaningful shadows. I'd always found that cinematic. Now I was living it. James was waiting in his conference room, a sprawl of documents already laid out on the mahogany table. He stood when I entered, extending a hand and gesturing to the coffee service he'd had prepared. Everything about James Corrigan was old-school legal precision. The 3-piece suits, the grandfather's pocket watch, the way he still took notes with a fountain pen. David, he said, studying me with eyes that had seen 30 years of divorces, bankruptcies, and financial warfare. You look like a man who's made a decision. I have. Good. Decisiveness makes my job easier. He poured 2 cups of coffee, black for both of us, and sat down. Let's talk about what you're trying to accomplish and the cleanest way to get there. For the next 45 minutes, James walked me through the landscape of asset separation. In California, he explained, community property laws meant that anything acquired during the marriage was technically half hers anyway, but co-signed debt was a different animal entirely. You're not obligated to remain on these loans, he said, tapping a pen against the mortgage documents I'd brought. But getting your name removed requires either her consent or refinancing, which requires her qualifying on her own. Can she? James looked at the financial disclosure I'd prepared. Claire's salary was impressive, $185,000 as a senior associate, but against her student loans, credit card debt, and the reality of trying to carry a $2.3 million mortgage alone, not without significant lifestyle adjustments, he said carefully. The debt-to-income ratio would be prohibitive. The bank would require her to refinance at a higher rate if they'd approve her at all. And that's assuming she could come up with the capital to buy you out of your equity, which is, based on current market value and your down payment contribution, approximately $470,000. I let that number sit between us. Nearly $500,000. The down payment had come almost entirely from my signing bonus when I made partner. Claire had contributed $30,000, her entire savings at the time, and I'd covered the rest. We'd never discussed it. It was just what you did when you were building a life together. Except we weren't building anymore. We were unbuilding, and the foundation was turning out to be far more mine than ours. The car? I asked. Similar situation. It's a lease-to-own arrangement, current buyout around $67,000. She'd need to refinance or find a co-signor. Given her current debt load, he trailed off meaningfully. The investment property? That one's more complicated. It's generating rental income, which helps, but the mortgage is substantial. You're looking at roughly 180,000 in equity there, split based on contribution percentages. But again, she'd need to refinance to remove you, and that rental income isn't enough to qualify her on its own. I did the math in my head, $470,000 plus $80,000 plus $33,500, half the car's buyout, $683,500, more than $600,000 in obligations that suddenly became solely hers the moment my name disappeared from the paperwork. How long, I asked. If I start the process today, how long until I'm clear? James leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. With her cooperation, we could have you off the mortgage in 30 days. The car, maybe 2 weeks. The investment property, 45 days. But David, he paused, his expression shifting into something almost paternal. This is going to devastate her financial position. You understand that? I do. And you're certain this is what you want. Because once you start this process, once the banks start sending her refinancing requirements, and she realizes what's happening, he let the implication hang. I thought about Claire sitting across from me at dinner, fork moving precise patterns through pasta, telling me that being called my wife made her look small. I thought about 7 years of support and sacrifice and silent partnership, reduced to an embarrassing label she wanted to shed at office parties. I thought about the envelope that would be waiting for her at brunch on Saturday. The one that would contain a single sheet of paper with a simple message and a longer document listing every financial obligation I was removing myself from, along with the deadline dates and refinancing requirements. I'm certain, I said. James nodded slowly. Then let's begin. The paperwork took another hour, formal request to the bank, notifications of intent to remove co-senior status, documentation of my equity contributions, letters to the property management company regarding the investment property. Every form signed and witnessed, every statement notarized, every legal mechanism engaged. By the time I left James's office, the machinery of dissolution was officially in motion. Susan at the bank was next. She was younger than James, sharper around the edges, with the kind of aggressive competence that came from working your way up through commercial lending without connections or shortcuts. She'd handled our accounts for 4 years, had personally approved the mortgage increase when we bought the investment property. Now she sat across from me in a glass-walled office, reviewing my request with an expression that shifted between professional neutrality and something that might have been sympathy. Mr. Morrison, she said finally, I want to make sure you understand the implications here. If we remove you from these obligations, Mrs. Morrison will need to requalify for all of them. Based on her current financial profile, she pulled up something on her screen, frowned. It's going to be difficult, the mortgage especially. Her income is good, but her debt-to-income ratio is already at 43%. Add in the full mortgage payment, and we're looking at 71%. We can't approve that. So she'd need to refinance? She'd need to refinance, yes. And given current interest rates, she'd be looking at a jump from your current 3.2% to probably 6.8%, maybe 7%. On a mortgage that size, that's an additional $4,800 per month. I absorbed this, nearly $5,000 more per month, on top of everything else. The car loan is more straightforward, Susan continued. She can probably get approved for that on her own, though again, at a higher rate. But Mr. Morrison, David, can I speak candidly? Please, this is going to look like financial abandonment. In a divorce, this kind of move, she hesitated. It can get ugly. Are you sure you want to do this before consulting with a divorce attorney? I'm not divorcing her, I said quietly. I'm just removing myself from obligations that apparently make her look like she's settled. Susan's eyes widened slightly. I see. How long until she receives notification? We'll send letters to both parties within 72 hours. They'll outline the refinancing requirements and give her 45 days to complete the process. After that, if she hasn't refinanced, we'll begin proceedings to call the loans due. And if she can't pay, then we'd be looking at default proceedings, foreclosure on the house, repossession of the vehicle. It won't come to that, obviously. She'll refinance or find another co-senior or Susan trailed off, the unspoken options hanging between us. Or she'd have to sell everything. Downsize. Adjust her lifestyle to match what she could actually afford on her own. Live within means that didn't include my credit score propping up her ambitions. Thank you, Susan, I said, standing. I appreciate your help with this. She stood as well, extending her hand. Mr. Morrison, David, whatever's happening between you two, I hope you work it out. You've always seemed like one of the good ones. I smiled, though it felt like a muscle memory rather than an emotion. Past tense noted. The sun was lower when I emerged from the bank, casting long shadows across the financial district. I had 30 minutes before my dinner with Richard, so I walked. Past the bistro where Claire and I had our first date, past the theater where we'd seen Hamilton on our second anniversary, past the corner where I'd tripped on a crack in the sidewalk while we were walking home from a party, and she'd laughed so hard she'd had to sit down on the curb, and I'd sat down next to her, and we'd stayed there for 20 minutes, just sitting on a dirty curb at 2 a.m., happy for no reason at all. When had that stopped? When had happiness become something that needed a reason? Richard was already at Marcello's when I arrived, a glass of Chianti in front of him, and that expression he wore when he was about to deliver news that was technically good but practically complicated. David, he said as I sat down, I've been running numbers all day. Let me buy you a drink. You're going to need it. Over pasta carbonara and a bottle of wine I barely tasted, Richard walked me through the financial reality of what I was doing. The tax implications, the equity calculations, the way my net worth would shift once I was no longer liable for Claire's portion of the marital debt. Here's the thing, he said, twirling spaghetti with the focused attention of a man who took food seriously. If you remove yourself from her obligations but you're still married, you're essentially creating a financial separation without the legal protection of divorce. If she defaults, it won't affect your credit, but it could affect your marital assets. And if you do eventually divorce, she could argue that you deliberately sabotaged her financial position, which could impact the settlement. And if I don't do this, then you remain obligated for debts she's incurring, potentially for years. And based on what you've told me about her spending patterns, he pulled out a spreadsheet. She's averaging $8,700 per month in discretionary spending. That's shopping, dining, travel, things that aren't covered by her salary after her existing obligations, which means she's either using credit cards or using joint accounts, I finished. Using joint accounts, he confirmed, which you're funding. David, in the last 6 months, you've essentially subsidized her lifestyle to the tune of $52,000. That's money that could be in investments, retirement, savings. Instead, it's going to maintain an image that apparently includes not being associated with you. The number hit harder than it should have, $52,000. I thought about the extra hours I'd worked, the weekends at the office, the deals I'd closed while she was at the firm's holiday parties, networking without the encumbrance of a husband. What do you recommend? I asked. Richard leaned back, studying me with the assessing gaze of someone who'd seen a lot of marriages implode across his desk. Honestly, if this is heading toward divorce, do it now, clean break. But if you think there's a chance at reconciliation, this move is going to make that nearly impossible. She's going to see this as a betrayal. She told me that being called my wife made her look like she settled. I said quietly, "What do you call that?" Richard was silent for a long moment. Then he raised his glass. "I call that clarity. So here's to helping her live up to her own standards." We drank to that, and to the envelope that was being prepared for Saturday, and to the look on Claire's face when she realized that independence had a price tag she hadn't calculated. I got home after 9, and the house was lit up, Claire's car in the garage. I could hear her on a call in her office, the home office that I'd built for her, custom shelves and all, during the pandemic. Her voice drifted down the stairs, animated, laughing at something someone had said. She didn't come down to greet me, didn't call out to ask how my day had been. Just stayed in her office, living her life in a space I'd created, funded by money I'd earned, supported by credit I'd provided. I sat in the kitchen, in the dark, and waited for something to feel different. It didn't, not yet. But on Saturday at the terrace at her brunch with her friends, When she opened that envelope and read the words I'd carefully chosen, that's when everything would change. That's when Claire Morrison, senior associate, would learn exactly what settling looked like from the other side. Friday morning arrived with the kind of silence that feels manufactured. I woke at 5:30, the bed beside me, still warm but empty. Claire had already left for an early meeting, or so the text on my phone claimed. Sent at 5:47 a.m., professional, informational, the kind of message you send to a roommate, not a husband. Not that I was her husband anymore, apparently. Just the man whose last name she'd taken and whose financial infrastructure she'd borrowed. I lay there in the gray pre-dawn light, staring at the ceiling fan that had been making that small clicking sound for 3 months now. I'd kept meaning to fix it. Claire had kept meaning to call someone. In the end, we'd both just learned to sleep through the clicking, the way you learn to sleep through any persistent annoyance if you're committed to ignoring it long enough. Funny how marriage worked like that. The small problems you didn't fix became the soundtrack to your life until one day you realized you'd been listening to broken things for years. My phone buzzed. James Corrigan, emailing at 6 in the morning because apparently every attorney I knew had abandoned the concept of sleep. David, all documents filed and processed. Bank notifications will go out today. Your name will be officially removed from all co-signed obligations by end of business Monday. The investment property will take until next Friday due to the rental agreement complications. But everything else is in motion. I've also prepared the document you requested for tomorrow's event. Attached. Let me know if you want any revisions. JC. I opened the attachment, read it 3 times. It was perfect, clinical, devastating in its precision. Every fact laid out with the kind of clarity that left no room for misinterpretation. The envelope would be cream-colored cardstock, expensive, the kind of paper that signaled importance. Inside, a single sheet would be folded once, no theatrics, just information. And beneath that information, a longer document, the one that detailed every financial obligation I was removing myself from, every dollar I'd contributed, every debt I'd carried that had never been mine in any way except legally. The friends at her brunch table would see her face change, would lean in, concerned, asking what was wrong. And Claire would have to choose, lie and pretend everything was fine, or tell the truth and admit that the lifestyle they all admired had been built on scaffolding she couldn't maintain alone. Either way, the image would crack. I forwarded the document to Mark with a simple message. This is what goes in the envelope. Make sure it's there before she arrives. Mark responded immediately. Dude, are you sure about this? Mark was my college roommate, now a successful restaurateur who owned 3 places in the city, including the Terrace. We'd stayed close over the years, close enough that he knew Claire almost as well as I did, close enough to know that what I was doing would detonate like a bomb in the middle of her carefully curated social circle. I'm sure, I typed back. She's going to kill you, or me, probably both of us. She's going to understand exactly what she was dismissing. There's a difference. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, okay, it'll be there, table 7, her usual spot, 11 a.m. tomorrow. David, for what it's worth, I'm sorry it came to this. I didn't respond, didn't know what to say. Sorry felt inadequate. Thank you felt wrong. The truth was, I wasn't sure what I felt except a strange numbness, like I was watching someone else dismantle a life that had stopped fitting years ago, and I'd just been too committed to the idea of forever to notice. The office was a welcome distraction. Fridays were usually lighter, but the Meridian deal was entering final stages, which meant a flurry of last-minute adjustments and contract reviews. I buried myself in work, in the clean logic of terms and conditions, in a world where everything was negotiable and nothing was personal. Jennifer brought me lunch at 1, a salad I'd forgotten I ordered from the place Claire and I used to go to every Wednesday. Jennifer set it down carefully, along with a bottle of sparkling water and a look that suggested she wanted to say something but couldn't figure out how. David, she finally ventured, hovering near the door. I know it's not my place, but are you okay? I looked up from the contract I'd been reviewing without actually reading. Jennifer was watching me with genuine concern, the kind that comes from working closely enough with someone to know when their normal is performing its own quiet collapse. I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me on Monday. She nodded, accepting this. For what it's worth, I've always thought you deserve better than someone who treats you like an accessory. I blinked, surprised. She told you that? About the introduction thing? No, but I've worked for you for 3 years, David. I've seen how you talk about her versus how she talks about you. I've taken her calls. Jennifer's expression hardened slightly. Last month, she called to remind you about some firm dinner. I said you were in a meeting with Tokyo, that it was important. She said, Jennifer hesitated. Said what? She said, he's always in important meetings. Tell him some things are more important than work, like not embarrassing me by showing up late. And then she hung up. Jennifer's jaw tightened. You'd been up for 36 hours straight closing the Hendricks deal. You'd missed 2 meals. And she was worried about being embarrassed. The salad sat in front of me, suddenly even less appealing. Why didn't you tell me? Because you loved her. And who am I to interfere with that? Jennifer shrugged. But David, anyone who makes you feel like you're not enough, they're not worth the space they take up in your head. After she left, I sat there for a long time, the salad untouched, thinking about all the small moments I'd dismissed. The offhand comments, the casual dismissals. The way Claire had slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted from partner to critic to someone who saw me as a liability to be managed rather than a person to be cherished. When had I become so easy to overlook? My phone rang at 3, Claire. I stared at her name on the screen. Claire Morrison, because she'd insisted on keeping my last name in her phone even as she apparently wanted to distance herself from it everywhere else, and let it ring through to voicemail. 30 seconds later, the voicemail notification appeared. I listened to it while staring out at the city skyline, at all those glass towers full of people living their own quiet dramas. David, hi, I wanted to talk about the other night, about what I said. I think maybe you misunderstood. Can you call me back? I have that brunch tomorrow with the girls, but maybe we could have dinner tomorrow night. Just the 2 of us? Okay, call me. Her voice was different than it had been at dinner. Softer, almost uncertain. The voice of someone who'd said something they were beginning to regret but couldn't quite bring themselves to take back. Too late, I thought. The machinery was already in motion. By Monday, she'd have letters from the bank. By next Friday, she'd have 30 days to refinance or lose everything we'd built. And tomorrow, at 11 a.m., she'd have an envelope that would make it very clear exactly what we had actually been all along. I didn't call her back. Instead, I spent the afternoon finalizing the Meridian deal, reviewing one last time the contracts that would officially close on Monday morning. It was a good deal, great even. The kind of deal that would add another 0 to my annual bonus, that would solidify my position at the firm, that would prove I was exactly as good at my job as I'd always believed I was. The kind of deal that used to matter because I was building something for us. Now it just mattered because it was mine. At 6, I left the office, drove home through Friday evening traffic, past all the restaurants where people were beginning their weekends, celebrating survival of another work week. Past the wine bar where Claire and I used to meet for happy hour on Fridays, back when we still had things to say to each other that weren't logistical updates or passive-aggressive observations. The house was dark when I arrived. Claire was still at the office, presumably, or out with colleagues, or wherever she went these days when she wasn't home, living the life of someone unencumbered by a husband who made her look settled. I walked through the rooms we'd furnished together, seeing them differently now. The couch we'd spent 3 weekends shopping for, I'd paid for it. The dining table where she'd told me being called her husband diminished her. I'd paid for that too. The art on the walls, the rug in the living room, the sound system, the fixtures, the appliances. I'd paid for all of it, or co-signed for it, or provided the credit that made it possible. This house wasn't ours. It was mine, occupied by someone who'd been living rent-free in more ways than one. I poured myself a scotch, Macallan 18, the bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and sat in the living room in the dark, watching the city lights through the floor-to-ceiling windows I'd paid extra to install because Claire had loved the view. My phone buzzed again. Another call from Claire. I let it go to voicemail again. This time she texted, "David, I really need to talk to you. Where are you? Are you home?" I looked at the text for a long moment, then typed, "Working late, don't wait up." Three dots appeared. Disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Okay, we need to talk though, soon." "Sure," I typed back. "After your brunch tomorrow. We'll talk then." Because by then, she'd have opened the envelope. By then, she'd know exactly what we needed to talk about. By then, the confusion in her text would have crystallized into something much clearer. Understanding that actions have consequences, and words, especially careless words about settlement and diminishment, have a way of manifesting the exact reality they describe. I finished the scotch, poured another, sat there until the lights of the city blurred together into a general glow of other people's lives, continuing uninterrupted, while mine underwent its careful demolition. Around 10, I heard the garage door open, Claire's heels on the hardwood floor, the sound of her purse being set down in the entryway. A pause, probably her noticing I was home, seeing my car in the garage. "David?" Her voice floated through the house, tentative. I didn't answer. Just sat there in the dark, visible only as a silhouette against the window. She found me anyway, stood in the doorway to the living room, backlit by the hallway light, looking like a stranger I'd once known intimately. "You're home," she said. "I thought you were working late." "I was. Now I'm not. Are you, are you sitting in the dark?" Seemed appropriate. She moved into the room, turning on a lamp. The sudden light felt aggressive, exposing. She was still in her work clothes, a tailored charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent, paired with the Louboutin heels I'd bought her for her birthday last year. "David, we need to talk about what I said the other night." "Do we?" "Yes. I think you took it the wrong way. I wasn't trying to diminish me, make me feel like I'm an embarrassment, suggest that 7 years of marriage should be hidden at professional functions because it makes you look less impressive." She flinched. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Claire? Explain it to me, because from where I'm sitting, it seemed pretty clear." She sat down on the edge of the couch, posture perfect even now, trained by years of courtroom appearances and client meetings to never show weakness. "I meant that in professional contexts, I need to be seen as my own person, not as someone's wife, not as half of a couple, as me. You are seen as you. You've always been seen as you. I've never introduced you as anything other than Claire Morrison, exceptional attorney who happens to be married to me. But apparently that happens to be married part is the problem. You don't understand the pressure." "No, Claire. I understand it perfectly. I understand that you've built your entire identity around being independent and impressive and untouchable. And somewhere along the way, I became evidence of dependence, of being tied to someone, of being something other than the self-made success story you want everyone to see." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Is that really what you think? That I don't value what we have?" "I think you don't value what I've contributed to what you have. There's a difference right there." "What's that supposed to mean?" I stood up, walked to the window, my reflection ghostly in the glass. "It means that tomorrow at your brunch, you're going to receive something. An envelope. I'd recommend you open it in private, but that's up to you." I felt her stiffen behind me. "What are you talking about? What envelope?" "You'll see tomorrow." "David, I'm tired, Claire. I'm going to bed." I turned to face her. "Enjoy your brunch. Introduce yourself however you want. Be whoever you need to be. Just know that starting Monday, you're going to have to be that person without certain support structures you've gotten used to." What the hell does that mean? But I was already walking past her, toward the stairs, toward the guest room where I'd been sleeping for the past 2 nights, without her apparently noticing or caring. "David!" She followed me to the base of the stairs. "You can't just say cryptic things and walk away. What's in the envelope? What support structures?" I paused on the landing, looked down at her. She was beautiful even now, even angry and confused and standing in the wreckage of something she hadn't yet realized was destroyed. You wanted to be seen as someone who didn't settle, I said quietly. I'm just making sure the reality matches the image. Good night, Claire. I left her standing there, questions unasked and unanswered, in a house that was rapidly becoming unfamiliar to both of us. In the guest room, I lay awake, staring at a ceiling that didn't have a clicking fan, listening to the silence that felt less like peace and more like the space between lightning and thunder. Tomorrow at 11 a.m., the thunder would arrive, and I would be far away, drinking coffee in a different part of the city, waiting for the text messages and phone calls that would inevitably come when Claire Morrison, senior associate, opened an envelope and discovered exactly what she'd been taking for granted. My phone buzzed one last time. A text from Mark. Everything said, envelope will be at table 7 under the napkin. David, whatever happens tomorrow, I hope you know what you're doing. I typed back, so do I. But the truth was, I knew exactly what I was doing. For the first time in years, I knew exactly what I was doing. I was showing my wife what settling really looked like. And tomorrow at a brunch table surrounded by her friends, she was going to learn the price of every careless word she'd spoken. Saturday morning came with the kind of golden light that photographers pay fortunes to capture. I woke at 7, earlier than necessary, but sleep had become something I approached rather than achieved. The guest room bed was comfortable enough, a California king we'd bought for when Claire's parents visited, rarely used except by me now, but comfort wasn't the issue. The issue was lying in bed knowing that 3 miles away, an envelope with cream-colored cardstock sat waiting beneath a linen napkin at table 7, and in 4 hours my wife would sit down to mimosas and French toasts and discover that her world had quietly reorganized itself around her absence of appreciation. I showered, dressed in jeans and a Henley, the casual uniform of a man with nowhere important to be on a Saturday morning. Made coffee in the kitchen where Claire and I used to cook together, back when weekends meant experimenting with recipes and laughing at our failures and succeeding just often enough to feel competent. The house was silent. Claire's bedroom door, our bedroom door technically, though the possessive plural felt increasingly archaeological, remained closed. She'd gotten home late last night after I'd gone to the guest room. I'd heard her moving around, heard the shower run, heard her pacing in a way that suggested she was either on the phone or working through something that didn't have easy answers. Good, I'd thought. Let her be unsettled. Let her feel a fraction of what I'd felt sitting across from her at dinner, being told I made her look small. Now, in the morning light, I poured my coffee and tried to locate whatever emotion was supposed to accompany premeditated devastation of your spouse's financial security. Guilt, satisfaction, regret? What I felt instead was tired, bone-deep tired. The kind of exhaustion that comes not from lack of sleep, but from carrying something heavy for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to put it down. Today, I was putting it down. My phone read 8:47 a.m. Claire's brunch started at 11. Mark would already be at the terrace overseeing the Saturday rush, making sure everything was perfect, making sure the envelope was positioned exactly where it needed to be. I'd planned to be far away when it happened, maybe at the gym, or getting a massage, or sitting in some coffee shop across town where I couldn't possibly be implicated in the immediate aftermath, somewhere with an alibi. But as I sat there with my coffee, watching the morning light paint patterns across the floor, I realized I didn't want to be far away. I wanted to be close enough to see it happen. Not close enough to be seen. I wasn't cruel despite everything, but close enough to witness the moment when Claire Morrison, senior associate, independent and impressive, and unencumbered by the diminishing label of wife, learned what independence actually cost. The terrace was in the Pearl District, a neighborhood of converted warehouses and upscale retail that catered to the kind of people who brunched at 11 and thought nothing of $60 entrees. There was a coffee shop across the street, a real one, not a chain, the kind with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls and baristas who remembered your order. I could be there, anonymous in the weekend crowd, far enough to be invisible, close enough to watch through the floor-to-ceiling windows that made the terrace's main dining room visible from the street. Close enough to see her face when she opened it. I finished my coffee, left the mug in the sink, a small rebellion against the way Claire always insisted on loading the dishwasher immediately, as if leaving evidence of living was somehow shameful. Grabbed my keys and my wallet and my phone, already buzzing with a text. Mark. She just made the reservation confirmation call. Party of 6. She sounds normal, too normal, like she's trying to convince herself everything's fine. Me. Is the envelope in place? Mark. Sitting there like a loaded gun. David, last chance to back out. I can remove it. No one has to know. I stared at his message for a long moment. This was the decision point. The place where I could choose mercy over justice, could decide that 7 years of marriage deserved more grace than this public unraveling. But then I remembered her voice at dinner. Flat, matter of fact. It makes me look like I settled. Not angry, not cruel, just stating a fact, like commenting on the weather or the quality of the wine. That was somehow worse than cruelty. Cruelty came from passion, from feeling too much. What she'd shown me was indifference, a casual dismissal of everything I'd invested in us. Me. Leave it. Mark. Okay, I'll be in the kitchen. Can't watch this happen to someone I've known for 7 years, even if she deserves it. The drive to the Pearl District took 20 minutes, traffic light on a Saturday morning. I parked 3 blocks from the terrace, walked to the coffee shop, and ordered a pour-over from a barista with geometric tattoos and an eyebrow piercing who couldn't have cared less about my domestic drama. The shop was perfect, crowded enough that I blended in, quiet enough that I could think. I took a table near the window, positioned so I could see the terrace across the street without being obvious about it. Watched the restaurant's main dining room through 2 layers of glass, the distance creating a buffer that felt both protective and voyeuristic. Table 7 was visible, empty still, set for 6 with white linens and champagne flutes and small vases of seasonal flowers. The envelope sat beneath the napkin at the head of the table, exactly where Mark had promised. From this distance, it could have been anything. A menu, a promotional card, a thank you note from management. It was none of those things. My phone read 10:23, 37 minutes until her party arrived. Until Claire and her 5 friends, women I'd met at various firm functions, women who'd smiled at me politely while evaluating whether I was worthy of their circles, Claire, sat down to celebrate another Saturday of successful lives and careful image management. I sipped my coffee, waited, thought about all the decisions that had led to this moment. The decision to co-sign her mortgage when her credit wouldn't qualify her a loan. The decision to add my name to her car loan when she'd totaled the previous one and her insurance had lapsed. The decision to invest in the rental property she'd found, even though the neighborhood made me nervous and the numbers barely worked. All those decisions made from love, from partnership, from the belief that my strength could shore up her weaknesses because that's what marriage meant. Except marriage apparently meant something different to Claire. It meant a convenient arrangement that provided financial stability while she built the career that would eventually allow her to transcend the need for it. I'd been infrastructure, scaffolding, the temporary support that gets removed once the building can stand on its own. Today, the scaffolding was removing itself. At 10:47, the first of her friends arrived. Melissa something or other, another attorney at Claire's firm, tall and elegant, in the way of women who've never struggled with anything more serious than which vacation home to visit. She was greeted by the hostess, led to table 7, seated with her back to the window. Not Claire's seat. Claire would be facing the window, facing the street, positioned to see and be seen. 3 more arrived by 10:55. Jennifer Wu, Claire's closest friend from law school. Angela Corso, the partner everyone said would make senior partner before 40. And 2 others whose names I'd forgotten, but whose faces I recognized from the firm's holiday party last year. The party where Claire had introduced me as David, who works in finance, without the wife label she'd found so diminishing. They chatted, laughed, ordered drinks. Mimosas arrived in crystal flutes. The table came alive with the kind of animated conversation that women have when they've temporarily escaped the demands of their careers and can just be people who enjoy each other's company. I watched them and felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction, not anticipation, but a kind of sadness for what was about to be lost. Because after today, these brunches would be different. After today, Claire would be the one with the crisis, the one who needed support, The one whose carefully constructed life had revealed its dependence on things she'd taken for granted. At 11:04, Claire arrived. Even from across the street, through two windows and 40 feet of distance, she was magnetic. She moved through the restaurant with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her right to occupy space, wearing a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair styled in the artful way that looked effortless, but required 45 minutes and expensive products. She greeted her friends with hugs and air kisses, slid into her seat, the one facing the window, facing me, though she couldn't possibly see me through the coffee shop's tinted glass, and reached for her mimosa with a smile that looked almost real. Almost. But I'd been married to her for 7 years. I knew the difference between her real smile, the one that crinkled her eyes and showed her slightly crooked left incisor, and her professional smile, the one that conveyed warmth without vulnerability. This was the professional smile, the one that said, everything is fine, I'm fine, we're all fine here. She was performing. Even here, with her closest friends, she was performing. The waiter approached, took orders. More drinks arrived. The table settled into the rhythm of a well-practiced routine. These women had been doing this monthly for 3 years, ever since Claire had made senior associate and needed to cement her place in the firm's social hierarchy. I checked my phone. 11:18. She still hadn't noticed the envelope. The food arrived at 11:27. French toast for Jennifer. Eggs Benedict for Angela. A grain bowl for Claire because she was perpetually on some wellness program that required eliminating entire food groups in pursuit of optimization. They ate, talked, laughed at something Angela said. The brunch proceeded exactly as planned, just another Saturday celebrating lives well lived and ambitions well served. And still, Claire hadn't touched her napkin. I ordered another coffee from the tattooed barista who'd started giving me concerned looks because I'd been sitting there for over an hour nursing one cup. She brought it with a small cookie on the side, unprompted, the kind of gentle kindness that people extend to strangers who look like they're going through something. "You okay?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." She nodded, accepting this, and left me to my vigil. At 11:43, Jennifer said something that made Claire laugh. A real laugh this time, the kind that transformed her face from beautiful to radiant. For a moment, I saw the woman I'd married, the one who'd laughed so hard at my terrible jokes that wine came out of her nose, the one who'd danced in the kitchen at midnight to songs only she could hear, the one who'd made me believe that love was enough to build a life on. But then the laugh faded and she was back to being Claire Morrison, senior associate, and I was back to being the man watching his marriage end through a coffee shop window. She reached for her napkin. Everything inside me tensed. This was it. The moment I'd engineered, the consequence I'd set in motion, the revelation that would change everything. But she didn't pick up the napkin. She used it in place, dabbing at her lips, then set it back down. The envelope remained hidden. Minutes ticked by. 11:47, 11:51, 11:56. The table ordered more drinks. Dessert menus appeared. They were going to be here a while, stretching the brunch into early afternoon the way these gatherings always did. And Claire still hadn't found the envelope. I was beginning to think Mark had placed it wrong, or it had slipped onto the floor, or some cosmic intervention had decided I didn't really want this after all. When Angela said something and gestured at Claire's seat, Claire looked down, frowned, lifted the napkin. And there it was. Even from across the street, I could see her expression change. Confusion first. Who leaves an envelope at a restaurant table? Then curiosity. She picked it up, turned it over, saw her name written in my handwriting. Recognition flickered across her face. She knew my handwriting. 7 years of birthday cards and anniversary notes and love letters from business trips had made it as familiar as her own. She looked around the table. Her friends were still talking, Jennifer telling some story that involved animated hand gestures. No one was watching Claire in that moment. No one saw her carefully open the envelope, slip out the single sheet of paper folded inside. No one except me. I watched her unfold it, watched her eyes scan the first few lines, watched her face go very still in a way that had nothing to do with calm and everything to do with shock. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. She read it again, slower this time, making sure she understood, making sure the words said what she thought they said. Then she set it down on the table, very carefully, like it was something fragile or dangerous or both. Angela noticed first, touched Claire's arm, said something I couldn't hear through the noise and distance but could read in her body language. "Are you okay?" Claire didn't answer, just stared at the paper in front of her professional smile completely gone now, replaced by something raw and undefended. Jennifer leaned over, tried to see what was on the paper. Claire pulled it away, folded it quickly, shoved it back in the envelope. But her hands were shaking now, and everyone at the table had noticed that something was wrong. The table went quiet, all five friends looking at Claire, concern and curiosity warring in their expressions. Claire said something. I could see her mouth move, could see her trying to reassemble the smile, the composure, the image of someone who had everything under control. It wasn't working. She stood abruptly, the kind of standing that knocks chairs and startles waiters, said something to her friends. "I'm fine, just need a minute, probably," or some variation on that theme. Then she was moving, threading through the restaurant toward the back where the bathrooms were, the envelope clutched in one hand like evidence. Her friends watched her go, exchanging glances that spoke volumes. Something just happened. Something bad. What the hell was in that envelope? I sat in the coffee shop, my second cup of coffee cooling in front of me, and felt absolutely nothing except a hollow satisfaction that wasn't really satisfaction at all. My phone buzzed. Mark. She just locked herself in the bathroom, been in there 5 minutes. Her friends are freaking out. "What the hell did you write in that thing?" I pulled up the document on my phone, read it one more time, seeing it through Claire's eyes now. "Claire, you said that being introduced as my wife makes you look like you settled. I've spent the last few days thinking about what settlement it really means. Enclosed is a detailed accounting of every financial obligation bearing my name that has supported your lifestyle for the past 7 years. As of Monday, my name will be removed from all of them. You will need to refinance or find alternative arrangements within 45 days. I look forward to seeing you establish the independence you have been seeking." David, below that, 3 pages of financial documentation. The mortgage showing my 94% contribution to the down payment, the car loan, the investment property, every credit card, every joint account, every obligation I'd carried so she could build her career without the burden of debt catching up to her spending. All of it, itemized and categorized and time-stamped, proving exactly how much of her impressive life had been built on borrowed ground. I typed back to Mark. The truth. I wrote her the truth. Across the street, Claire emerged from the bathroom. Her mascara had run slightly. She'd been crying, then fixed it, then probably cried again. Her friends stood when she returned to the table, surrounding her with concern and questions she clearly didn't want to answer. She said something short, grabbed her purse, threw cash on the table. Too much cash, the gesture of someone who just needed to leave and didn't care about change. Then she was moving toward the exit, toward the street, toward whatever came next. Her friends called after her, but she didn't stop. I watched her push through the restaurant doors, out into the sunshine, standing on the sidewalk looking lost in a way I'd never seen her look before. Then she looked up, looked directly at the coffee shop window, directly at where I was sitting. She couldn't possibly see me through the tinted glass, couldn't possibly know I was there. But her eyes locked onto mine anyway, like some instinct that transcends reason. And in that moment, across 40 feet of distance and 2 panes of glass, I saw everything I'd wanted to see and nothing I'd expected to feel. Not defeat, not shame, not even anger, just devastation, pure and complete and utterly human. And I realized too late that being right and being righteous are not the same thing at all. Claire stood on that sidewalk for 47 seconds. I counted them, each one stretching like hours, while she stared at the coffee shop window where I sat frozen in my anonymous corner. Her phone was in her hand, forgotten halfway to her ear, her other hand still clutching the envelope, like it might suddenly transform into something less devastating if she just held it tightly enough. Then she moved. Not toward the coffee shop, thank God, because I wasn't ready for that confrontation. Not here, not now, not with her mascara-stained face and my hollow victory still settling in my chest like something toxic. She moved toward her car, the Tesla I'd co-signed for, the one that would need refinancing by the end of next month or be repossessed. She walked with the mechanical precision of someone in shock, someone whose autopilot had engaged because conscious thought had temporarily abandoned ship. I watched her fumble with the door handle, drop her keys, pick them up with shaking hands. Watched her sit in the driver's seat with the door still open, head bowed, shoulders trembling in a way that suggested she was either crying or trying very hard not to. My phone buzzed, her name on the screen. I stared at it through 3 rings before answering. David? Her voice was barely controlled, each word articulated with the careful precision of someone holding themselves together through sheer force of will. Where are you? Does it matter? Are you watching me right now? Are you somewhere nearby, watching this happen? I closed my eyes, said nothing. Oh my God. A sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. You are. You're watching me fall apart. And you're just, what, enjoying it? Taking notes for the next phase of whatever sick game this is? It's not a game, Claire. Then what is it? Because I'm sitting in my car with a document that says you've systematically removed yourself from every aspect of our financial life. And I can't figure out if this is divorce papers disguised as a spreadsheet or just you being unbelievably cruel. You said being called your wife made you look like you settled. I'm giving you the opportunity to prove you didn't. Silence on the other end, the kind of silence that has weight and texture and a sound like distant thunder. Do you have any idea, she said finally, each word measured and cold, what you've just done? I have 45 days to refinance a $2 million mortgage that I can't qualify for on my own. I have car payments I can't afford without your credit propping them up. Her voice cracked. I have 5 friends who just watched me have a breakdown over brunch, and I can't even explain why, because the truth is so humiliating that I'd rather lie and say someone died. The truth is only humiliating if you're ashamed of it. Oh, fuck you, David. Fuck you and your philosophical bullshit. You did this to hurt me, to punish me for one comment I made. One comment. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to something I barely recognized. Claire, that comment was just the moment I finally heard what you've been saying for months, maybe years. Every time you introduce me as David who works in finance instead of your husband. Every time you ask me not to come to firm events because it's easier if you're seen as independent. Every time you've treated our marriage like a professional liability instead of a partnership. That's not fair. You know what's not fair? 7 years of co-signing your dreams while you systematically erased my presence from your narrative at the time. 7 years of supporting your ambitions while you decided I made you look small. That envelope doesn't even begin to calculate what I've contributed to your career in invisible ways. The dinners I cooked so you could work late, the dry cleaning I picked up, the clients I entertained while you prepared for trials, the entire infrastructure of domestic support that allowed you to focus on becoming Claire Morrison, senior associate, while I became, what, a footnote, an embarrassment, more silence. But this time I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow, the sound of someone trying to process information that doesn't fit their internal narrative. I never asked you to do those things, she said quietly. No, you didn't, because people like you don't ask. You just accept and then forget to be grateful, and then eventually start to resent the people who made it all possible because their very existence reminds you that you didn't do it alone. Is that what you think? That I'm not grateful? I think you confused gratitude with obligation and then decided you didn't want to feel obligated anymore. So you started cutting me out, little by little, until the only thing I was good for was a credit score and a tax benefit. I heard her car door close, heard the engine start, that silent Tesla purr that had seemed so sophisticated when we bought it, so environmentally conscious, so perfectly aligned with the image she wanted to project. I need to go, she said. I need to think. I need to figure out how to survive the financial apocalypse you just dropped on my life. Claire, no, don't. Don't try to soften this now. You wanted me to understand what I was taking for granted. Grand. Message received. Congratulations on the most elaborate fuck you I've ever experienced. I hope it was worth it. She hung up. I sat there with the dead phone in my hand, staring at the space where her Tesla had been, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settling over me like ash. The tattooed barista appeared at my table with a third coffee I hadn't ordered. "This one's on the house," she said. "You look like you're having the worst day of your life." "Not the worst," I said, "just the most expensive." She smiled sadly. "Been there. Well, not exactly there, whatever there is for you, but the general vicinity." She gestured at the empty chair across from me. "You mind if I take my break here? It's been a hell of a morning, and misery loves company." I nodded. She sat. We didn't talk, just sat in companionable silence while around us the coffee shop buzzed with Saturday morning conversations, people living their normal lives while mine underwent its controlled demolition. After a while, she said, "The woman across the street, the one who looked like her world just ended. That's your person?" "Was my person. Maybe still is. I don't know anymore." "What did you do?" I turned to look at her, this stranger with geometric tattoos and kind eyes, who was offering me something I hadn't realized I needed. A witness. Someone to hear the story without judgment or agenda. So I told her. Not everything, but the shape of it. The dinner conversation. The envelope. The 7 years of scaffolding being removed all at once. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "That's some Old Testament shit," she said finally. "Very eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, emotional devastation for emotional devastation." "You think I'm wrong. I think you're human and hurt, and humans do catastrophically stupid things when they're hurt." She sipped her coffee. "But I also think you're going to spend the next few months asking yourself if this was justice or just revenge wearing justice's clothes, or is... What's the difference? Justice restores balance. Revenge just spreads the pain around." She stood up, grabbed her empty cup. "For what it's worth, I hope you figure out which one this was before you lose something you can't get back. Thanks for the company." She left me there alone again, with her words echoing in the space she'd vacated. Justice or revenge? Restoration or retribution? The right thing done the wrong way, or the wrong thing dressed up in righteousness? I didn't know. And that not knowing felt worse than the original hurt that had started all of this. My phone buzzed again. Not Claire this time. Jennifer, my assistant, texting on a Saturday because apparently my entire support system had decided normal boundaries didn't apply during catastrophes. "I don't know what's happening, but Claire just called me crying, asking for your schedule next week. Should I be worried?" I stared at the text. Claire had called Jennifer, my assistant, crying. In 7 years, I'd never heard Claire cry on the phone to anyone except her mother, and then only once when her father died. She didn't do public vulnerability, didn't do emotional displays that might suggest weakness or need. Except now she was calling my assistant, crying because I just removed every financial foundation from under her life, and she was scrambling to understand the dimensions of the crater I'd created. "Tell her I'll be home tomorrow afternoon. We'll talk then." Jennifer. "David, are you okay? Because this doesn't feel okay." "No one's okay, but we will be, eventually." Jennifer. "If you need anything, even just someone to listen, I'm here." I thanked her and pocketed the phone. Looked around the coffee shop at all these people living their Saturday mornings, unburdened by the weight of marriages ending in slow motion, and felt a sudden overwhelming urge to be anywhere else. So I left, walked to my car, drove without destination through a city that was too beautiful for the ugliness unfolding in my life, past the park where Claire and I used to run together on Sunday mornings, past the wine bar where we'd had our first date, past the jewelry store where I'd bought her engagement ring, spending more than I should have because the way her eyes lit up when she saw a sparkle was worth any price. All these landmarks of a relationship that had seemed so solid, so permanent, now revealed as temporary as everything else. I ended up at my office. The building was almost empty on Saturdays, just a few dedicated souls working through the weekend, the kind of people who'd sold their lives to their careers and were either content with the transaction or too committed to admit regret. I rode the elevator to the 43rd floor, walked through the silent hallways to my office, sat at my desk where I'd sat thousands of times before, and opened my laptop. The Meridian deal documents stared back at me, ready to close on Monday. The culmination of 3 months of work, the validation of every skill I'd built over a 15-year career. The deal that was supposed to change everything, to push us past that final financial threshold into true security. Only there was no us anymore, just me, just my achievement, just a bonus that would go entirely to my accounts now, no longer diluted by our joint financial life. I should have felt victorious, should have felt the satisfaction of knowing that at least this, my career, my success, my value, was entirely mine and always had been. Instead, I felt empty, the kind of empty that makes you realize that achievements without someone to share them with are just items on a resume. Impressive, but ultimately hollow. My phone rang, unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Morrison, this is Detective Sarah Chen with the LAPD. Do you have a moment? My heart stopped. Detective? Police? Something had happened. Car accident, Claire driving upset, my fault, all my fault. What's wrong? Is Claire okay? Is she... Mrs. Morrison is fine, sir. She's here at the station. She came in about an hour ago to file a report. A report? What kind of report? She's alleging financial abuse, Mr. Morrison, claiming that you have systematically removed yourself from joint obligations with the intent to cause her financial harm. She's requesting a restraining order, preventing you from taking any further action regarding shared assets. The world tilted. Financial abuse, restraining order, police involvement. This wasn't just a marital dispute anymore. This was legal, official, the kind of thing that created records and had consequences that extended beyond our private catastrophe. That's not... I stopped, took a breath, thought about every legal thriller I'd ever read, every crime show that screamed, "Don't talk to police without a lawyer." I'd like to consult with my attorney before making any statement. That's your right, sir. But I do need to inform you that if the judge grants the temporary restraining order, you'll need to maintain at least 100 yards distance from Mrs. Morrison and refrain from any contact, direct or indirect, until the hearing. When's the hearing? Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., family court, downtown. You'll receive formal notification by end of day. I'd strongly recommend you have legal representation present. She gave me a case number, some additional information I barely processed, and hung up. I sat there in my empty office, staring at my phone, trying to understand how a dinner conversation about professional introductions had escalated in 5 days to police reports and restraining orders and legal proceedings. This wasn't what I'd wanted. Was it? I'd wanted her to understand, to feel a fraction of the dismissal I'd felt, to recognize what she'd taken for granted. I hadn't wanted to destroy her, hadn't wanted to become the villain in a story that had started with love and promise and two people believing they could build something that mattered. But that's what I'd become anyway. The man who'd systematically dismantled his wife's financial life out of hurt and pride and a desire to prove a point that now seemed petty and cruel and entirely disproportionate to the crime of a thoughtless comment. I called James Corrigan. Got his voicemail because even attorneys who work Saturdays have limits. Left a message explaining the situation, the police report, the Tuesday hearing, the suddenly very real consequences of my paper revenge. Then I called the one person I knew would answer, the one person who'd seen me through every major decision of my adult life, good and bad. My father picked up on the second ring. "David, I was just thinking about you. How are you, son?" And that did it. That simple question, asked with genuine care by someone who'd loved me before I'd accomplished anything worth loving, who'd loved me even after I'd failed at everything worth attempting. I told him everything. The dinner, the envelope, the brunch, the phone call, the police report, all of it spilling out in a confession that felt simultaneously relieving and damning. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. "Dad, I'm here, just trying to figure out how to tell you that you're being an idiot without you hanging up on me." Despite everything, I almost laughed. Pretty sure the ship has sailed on subtlety. "David, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to really think before you answer. What did you want to accomplish with that envelope? I wanted her to understand, no, not what you told yourself. What did you actually want in your gut, in that place where we're honest about our worst impulses? What did you want? I closed my eyes, thought about the moment I'd watched her read that paper, the moment her face had crumbled, the satisfaction I'd expected to feel, and the hollow emptiness I'd felt instead. I wanted her to hurt the way I hurt, I said quietly. I wanted her to feel small and dismissed and taken for granted. I wanted her to know what it's like to have someone you love treat your contribution as invisible. And did it work? Does she understand now? Yes, but I don't think understanding was actually the point. I think I just wanted revenge dressed up as a lesson. There it is, Dad said softly. That's the truth under all your justifications. And now you're facing the consequences of acting on your worst impulses instead of your best self. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to get a lawyer. You're going to go to that hearing on Tuesday. And you're going to ask yourself if winning this battle is worth losing the war. I think I already lost the war, Dad. Maybe. Or maybe this is just the part where things get worse before they get better. But David, and I mean this with all the love I have for you, you need to decide if you want to be right or if you want to be married. Because from where I'm sitting, you can't have both. We talk for another hour, not about solutions or strategies, just about life and marriage and the ways we hurt the people we love when we're hurting ourselves. About my mother and the fights they'd had over the years, the ones that nearly ended them and the ones that somehow made them stronger. About forgiveness, about humility, about the difference between standing up for yourself and burning down everything around you to prove a point. When I finally hung up, the sun was setting outside my office window, painting the city in shades of amber and gold, beautiful and indifferent to the small human dramas unfolding below. I had a hearing on Tuesday, a wife who'd filed a police report, a marriage that was either ending or evolving into something neither of us recognized. And I had a decision to make: double down on my righteous anger or find a way back to the person I'd been before hurt turned me into someone I barely recognized. I looked at the Meridian deal documents on my screen, thought about success and achievement and the hollow feeling of winning at things that don't matter while losing the things that do. Then I closed my laptop and drove home through the gathering dark, toward a house that might or might not still contain my wife, toward a future that was entirely uncertain and entirely my fault. The light was on when I arrived. Claire's car in the driveway. She was home. And somewhere between the car and the front door, I made my choice. The front door was unlocked. That small detail felt significant in a way I couldn't quite articulate, like she'd left it open as either invitation or indifference, and I wasn't sure which interpretation scared me more. I stood on my own threshold for a full minute, keys in hand, listening to the silence that emanated from inside. Not the comfortable silence of a home at rest, but the loaded quiet of someone waiting. Someone who'd heard my car pull up, heard my footsteps on the walkway, and had consciously decided not to come to the door. I opened it. The house was dark except for a single light in the living room. The same living room where I'd sat just nights ago, drinking scotch in the darkness, planning her unraveling. It felt like years had passed since then, though it had been less than a week. Claire sat on the couch, still in her cream-colored dress from brunch, though she'd removed her shoes. Her feet were tucked under her in that way she always sat when she was thinking through complex problems, a position I'd seen her adopt while preparing for trials, working through contract disputes, deciding whether to accept the senior associate position that had ultimately consumed our marriage. She didn't look up when I entered, just kept staring at something in her lap. The envelope. She was holding the envelope, along with several other papers I recognized from across the room. The bank notifications that had apparently arrived by courier while I'd been at the office. The ones that weren't supposed to arrive until Monday, but that some efficient bureaucrat had processed early because the universe had decided I didn't deserve the buffer of another day. "You came home," she said finally, not looking at me, voice flat. "I live here." "Do you?" Now she looked up, and her face was a roadmap of the past 12 hours. Red-rimmed eyes, makeup gone, expressions somewhere between devastation and a rage so cold it had calcified into something almost serene. Because it feels like you moved out emotionally about a week ago and just forgot to mention it. I stayed in the doorway, neutral territory, close enough to talk, far enough to run if this went sideways. I got a call from Detective Chen. I know, they told me they'd contact you. Financial abuse, Claire? A restraining order? You're involving the police in a marital dispute? Is that what you call it? A marital dispute? She laughed, brittle and sharp. You systematically dismantled my entire financial life. You engineered a public humiliation at a restaurant full of my colleagues and friends. You've essentially rendered me homeless and broke with 45 days' notice. But sure, let's call it a marital dispute. That sounds civilized. You're not homeless. You're not broke. You're just not propped up by my credit anymore. Same thing, David. For me, that's the same thing. She set the papers down carefully on the coffee table, arranging them in neat rows like evidence at a trial. Do you know what I did after I left the restaurant? After I called you and you confirmed that, yes, you were actually watching me have a breakdown like it was dinner theater? I said nothing. Waited. I called my bank, asked about refinancing options. Do you know what they told me? She picked up one of the papers. They told me that with my current debt-to-income ratio, they can't approve me for anything close to our current mortgage. They offered me a loan at 7.2% interest for $1.4 million. That's it, which means I'd need to come up with $900,000 in cash for the difference, or sell the house. There are other options. Oh, there are. Please enlighten me. What are these magical other options that don't involve me losing everything we built? You could find a co-signor. Ask your parents. My parents are retired, David. They live on a fixed income. They can't co-sign a $2 million mortgage. Your firm, then, a partner loan, and admit to the senior partners that I'm financially unstable, that my personal life is such a disaster that I need the firm to bail me out. She shook her head. That's career suicide. You know that. Or maybe you don't know that because you've never had to worry about optics. You've never had to perform competence every single day while people wait for you to fail so they can say they knew all along you weren't partnership material. Is that what this is about? Your career? Your image? It's about survival, David, something you've never had to think about because you've always had the luxury of being exactly who you are without consequences. She stood up, started pacing. The nervous energy that had been compressed into stillness and now demanding release. Do you know what Jennifer Wu said to me today? At brunch, after I came back from the bathroom? I don't. She said, whatever's in that envelope, you need to fix it before it affects your position at the firm. Not, are you okay? Not, how can we help? But fix it before it damages your career. Because that's the world I live in. The world where personal problems are professional liabilities. The world where showing weakness means showing you're not tough enough for partnership. And that's my fault? That you work in a toxic environment that treats humans like performance machines? It's not about fault. Her voice cracked, the anger fracturing to reveal something raw underneath. It's about reality. My reality. The one you just torched because I hurt your feelings at dinner. I hurt your feelings. I moved into the room now, the careful distance collapsing. Claire Burwas, you told me that being introduced as your husband made you look like you settled. You told me that our marriage, 7 years of our lives, was an embarrassment to your professional image. How am I supposed to respond to that? Like an adult, like someone who loves me. You could have talked to me. You could have told me it hurt. You could have suggested therapy or counseling or any of the thousand things that normal people do when their marriages hit rough patches. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face without sound, like her body had decided to betray her composure without her permission. Instead, you went nuclear. You didn't just punish me for one comment. You tried to destroy my entire life. I didn't try to destroy anything. I just removed my support. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it looks exactly the same. We stood there 6 feet apart in a living room full of furniture we'd chosen together, in a house we'd bought together, staring at each other like strangers who'd somehow ended up in the same disaster and couldn't figure out how they'd arrived. I filed the police report, Claire said finally, her voice steadier now, because my attorney told me I had to create a paper trail to document that you took unilateral action on shared assets with the intent to cause financial harm. It's not about punishment, it's about protection. Protection from me. Protection from what you've become. That landed like a physical blow. What I've become? This version of you, the one who engineers revenge schemes instead of having conversations, the one who watches his wife break down and feels satisfied instead of concerned, the one who thinks proving a point is more important than preserving a marriage. She wiped at her eyes, smearing the last remnants of mascara. I don't recognize you anymore, David, and that terrifies me more than the money problems. I sank into the chair across from her, felt the fight drain out of me, replaced by exhaustion so profound it felt existential. I don't recognize you either. Haven't for a while. Maybe we've both become people the other person can't love anymore. Don't say that. Why not, if it's true? Because it doesn't have to be true. Because people change and grow and sometimes grow apart, but that doesn't mean the growing is finished. We could still... She stopped, looked away. We could still find our way back. Could we? After this, after police reports and restraining orders and public humiliations and all the ways we've hurt each other this week? I don't know, but I know that giving up without trying is the one thing I'll regret for the rest of my life. The admission hung between us, fragile and impossible, an offer I hadn't expected. A door I'd thought I'd permanently closed suddenly cracked open again. What would trying even look like at this point? I asked. Claire sat back down, pulled her knees to her chest in a gesture so young and vulnerable it broke something in me. It looks like you going to that hearing on Tuesday and telling the judge you made a mistake, that you acted out of hurt and you want to undo the damage, that you're willing to restore your name to the obligations while we figure out what we actually want. And if I do that, if I roll everything back, what changes? I change. I hear you. I understand that I've been taking you for granted, that I've been so focused on building my career that I forgot to tend to the relationship that made that career possible. She looked at me directly now, her eyes meeting mine with the kind of honesty that can only come from hitting bottom. I was wrong about the introduction thing, about treating our marriage like a professional liability, about all of it. I was scared. Scared of what? Of being seen as someone who needed help, who couldn't do it alone, who was less impressive because she had support. She laughed bitterly. Turns out the thing I was most afraid of, looking dependent, is exactly what I am. I built my whole life on your foundation, and I was so busy being ashamed of that fact that I tried to pretend the foundation didn't exist. Why were you ashamed? Because in my world, needing anything from anyone is weakness, and weakness gets you passed over for partnership, gets you sidelined on important cases, gets you relegated to the second tier of attorneys who are good but not quite good enough. She pulled the throw blanket around her shoulders. My entire career has been about proving I'm tough enough, smart enough, independent enough. And then I'd come home to you, to this marriage where I could be soft and supported and cared for, and it felt like I was living two lives. And I couldn't figure out how to integrate them. So you chose your career life and tried to delete me from it. Yes, and that was unforgivably cruel. And I'm sorry. I am so sorry. But David, the apology should have felt like victory, like vindication, like the moment where she finally understood everything I'd been trying to make her see. Instead, it felt like grief, like watching someone you love admit to sins you'd already forgiven them for, back when you still believed forgiveness mattered. I don't know if sorry is enough, I said quietly. I know, but it's what I have. She pulled the blanket tighter. Will you at least think about it? About trying? About showing up on Tuesday and choosing us over being right? I looked around the living room, at the couch where we'd spent countless evenings, her feet in my lap while she read case files and I reviewed contracts. at the bookshelf we'd built together one Sunday, laughing at the IKEA instructions and ending up with parts we couldn't identify, in a structure that was slightly crooked, but held all our books anyway. At the window where we'd stood during the first winter storm after we bought the house, watching lightning illuminate the city while wrapped in each other's arms, believing we were building something that would outlast any weather. "I'll think about it," I said. Not a promise, not a commitment. Just the smallest possible acknowledgement that the door she'd opened hadn't been immediately slammed shut. She nodded, seemed to understand that this was the best I could offer right now. "I'm going to stay with Jennifer tonight," she said. "Give us both some space to process. The restraining order doesn't go into effect unless the judge grants it on Tuesday, so we're okay for now. But I think we both need some time to sit with everything that's happened." "Okay." She stood up, gathered her phone and keys in the envelope that had started all of this, paused at the doorway to the hall. "David, for what it's worth, I never thought you were an embarrassment. I never thought being married to you made me less. I didn't know how to be both things at once, the powerful attorney and the grateful wife. In trying to be strong, I made you feel small, and that was wrong." Then she was gone, up the stairs to pack a bag, leaving me alone in the living room with her apology and her absence, and a decision I had to make by Tuesday morning. I sat there for a long time after I heard her car pull away. Thought about my father's question. Did I want to be right, or did I want to be married? The answer should have been simple. Should have been obvious. Love should trump pride, partnership should matter more than proving a point, and 7 years of history should outweigh 1 week of hurt. But it wasn't simple, because somewhere in the complexity of our shared life, we'd both become people who'd forgotten how to be vulnerable with each other, who'd chosen pride over intimacy, image over authenticity, winning over connecting. And I didn't know if people could come back from that, if love could survive the weaponization of its own vulnerabilities, if trust could be rebuilt once you demonstrated exactly how much damage you were willing to inflict when hurt. My phone buzzed, a text from Claire, sent from Jennifer's driveway probably. "I love you. I know I've been terrible at showing it. I know I've hurt you in ways that maybe can't be fixed. But I love you, and I'm willing to fight for us if you are. Think about it. Please." I stared at those words until they blurred. 3 simple words that should have been enough to cut through everything else. I love you. The foundation we'd built on, before mortgages and careers and all the ways we'd learned to wound each other. Did I still love her? Yes. God help me, yes. Was love enough? That was the question I couldn't answer. I typed back, "I love you too. I'll see you Tuesday." Then I turned off my phone and sat in the darkness of our living room, in the house we couldn't afford separately, surrounded by the life we'd built together and nearly destroyed in the space of a week. Outside, the city lights glittered like false promises. Inside, I tried to figure out if there was any way back from the edge we'd brought ourselves to, or if some lines, once crossed, redefined the entire landscape permanently. Tuesday was 2 days away. 2 days to decide if I was brave enough to choose vulnerability over vindication. If I was strong enough to admit that being right had made me cruel. If I loved her enough to risk being hurt again. 2 days to decide if marriage was worth fighting for, or if some battles are lost the moment you decide to fight them. I didn't know the answer yet, but somewhere between the silence of that living room and the sunrise that would eventually come, I knew I had to find it. Sunday arrived with rain, not the dramatic kind that signals turning points in films, but the persistent drizzle that Los Angeles gets maybe 3 times a year, the kind that makes the whole city slow down and remember it's not actually immune to weather. I woke in the guest room again, disoriented for the half second before memory reassembled itself. Claire at Jennifer's. Police report filed. Hearing on Tuesday. A marriage in schematic form, reduced to legal proceedings and financial documentation, and a decision I still hadn't made. My phone showed 6:47 a.m. and 12 missed messages, all from people who'd apparently decided that Sunday morning was the appropriate time to weigh in on my imploding life. Jennifer, my assistant. "I don't know what happened between you two, but Claire showed up at my place last night looking destroyed. Whatever you're fighting about, please just talk to each other." Mark from the terrace. "Dude, her friends came back looking for her after she left. I had to play dumb about the envelope. They think she got bad medical news or something. This is getting really complicated. My father, thinking about you today, son. Call when you're ready. 3 messages from my mother escalating in maternal concern. Your father told me what's happening. Call me. Then, David Christopher Morrison. Call your mother. Finally, I'm coming over. Don't try to stop me. That last one was time-stamped 40 minutes ago, which meant she was probably already on the freeway, driving through rain from Pasadena with that determined expression she got when one of her children was in crisis and required intervention whether they wanted it or not. The remaining messages were from colleagues, friends, people in our social circle who'd somehow caught wind that something was wrong and were texting to check in with that particular brand of curiosity that masquerades as concern. I ignored them all. Made coffee, stood at the kitchen window, watching rain pattern the glass, trying to remember the last time I just existed without the weight of consequence pressing down on every thought. My mother arrived at 8:15, letting herself in with the key we'd given her years ago for emergencies. She appeared in the kitchen doorway like a small, determined force of nature, shaking rain from her umbrella with one hand while balancing a casserole dish with the other. I brought breakfast lasagna, she announced. You look terrible. Sit down. Good morning to you too, Mom. Don't good morning me, sit. I sat, watched her bustle around my kitchen with the confidence of someone who'd raised 3 sons and weathered 4 decades of marriage, and was therefore qualified to have opinions about everything. She served up breakfast lasagna, layers of eggs, cheese, sausage, and hash browns that she'd probably started making at 5 a.m., and poured 2 cups of coffee before finally sitting down across from me. Your father told me what you did, she said without preamble. The envelope, the financial devastation, all of it. I figured. He also told me what Claire said, the comment about settling. She took a bite of lasagna, chewed thoughtfully. That was cruel of her. Careless at best, deliberately hurtful at worst. You have every right to be angry. Thank you. I'm not finished. You also have every responsibility to be better than your anger, which you weren't. She fixed me with the look that had made me confess to breaking the neighbor's window when I was 12, even though she had no actual evidence. David, I'm going to tell you something I've never told you about your father and me. I waited. My mother didn't do confessional storytelling. Whatever was coming, it mattered. About 10 years into our marriage, you would have been 7, maybe 8. Your father had an opportunity to take a position in Chicago. Big promotion, significant salary increase. The kind of opportunity that comes once in a career. She wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. I told him no, told him I wouldn't move the family, that my career was finally gaining traction, that the kids were settled in good schools. I told him he'd have to choose between the and his family. I never knew that. Of course you didn't. We didn't tell you kids. But your father, he was devastated. Felt like I dismissed his ambitions, made him choose between his dreams and his family. And for about 6 months, he punished me for it. She looked up, her eyes holding mine. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, just small withdrawals, emotional distance, little comments about how my career wasn't bringing in nearly what his Chicago salary would have, making me feel the weight of what my choice had cost him. What happened? I almost left him. She said it simply, like stating a fact. I had an apartment picked out, had talked to a lawyer, because I realized that living with someone who was keeping score, who was making me pay for every decision that didn't center him, that wasn't a marriage. That was a hostage situation with nice furniture. I set down my fork. You never told me any of this. Because we worked through it. Your father came home one day and found me packing boxes, asked what I was doing. And I told him the truth, that I couldn't live with someone who'd weaponized his hurt, that I'd made a choice I believed was right for our family, and if he couldn't forgive me for it, then we were done. What did he say? He cried. Your father, who'd never cried in front of me before, sat on our bed and cried. Said he'd been so focused on what he'd lost that he'd forgotten what he still had. That his pride had made him cruel. That he was sorry. She smiled slightly. Then he helped me unpack the boxes, and we made an agreement. When we're hurt, we say we're hurt. We don't collect evidence. We don't build cases. We don't punish each other for being human. The breakfast lasagna sat heavy in my stomach. You think I'm punishing Claire. I think you're doing to her what your father did to me. And I think you're about to lose your marriage the same way he almost lost his. Because David listened to me. She reached across the table, took my hand. Marriage isn't about keeping score. It's not about making sure the other person feels as much pain as they caused you. It's about choosing every single day to be on the same side even when you're fighting. She humiliated me, Mom, made me feel like I was an embarrassment to her success. I know, and that was wrong of her. But removing yourself from all her financial obligations, making her face potential foreclosure and repossession, that's not evening the score, David. That's salting the earth. So I'm supposed to just forgive her? Pretend it didn't happen? No, you're supposed to be honest about being hurt without being destructive. You're supposed to remember that the person you're punishing is the same person you chose to build a life with. She squeezed my hand. You're supposed to ask yourself if you want to win this fight or save this marriage, because you can't do both. We sat in silence while the rain continued its steady percussion against the windows. I thought about my father, about the Chicago job I'd never known about the boxes my mother had packed and then unpacked because someone had chosen humility over pride. I don't know if I can forgive her, I said quietly. Can't or won't. What's the difference? Can't means the hurt is too deep to overcome. Won't means you've decided your hurt is more important than your relationship. She stood up, started clearing plates. Only you know which one it is. After she left, with strict instructions to call her after the Tuesday hearing and to eat the rest of the breakfast lasagna, I sat alone with her story and the parallels I couldn't ignore. My phone rang. Claire's mother. I almost didn't answer. But something, guilt, curiosity, the sense that refusing the call would be one more choice I'd regret, made me pick up. David. Patricia Morrison's voice carried the particular steel that Claire had inherited and weaponized in courtrooms. I think we should talk. Mrs. Morrison, Patricia, please. We've been family for 7 years, regardless of what's happening now. What did Claire tell you? Enough that you've removed yourself from her financial obligations, that there's a police report involved, that you're both hurting each other in ways that seem designed to cause maximum damage. A pause. She also told me what she said to you about the settling comment. Did she tell you I was watching when she opened the envelope? That I engineered it specifically to humiliate her in front of her friends? She did, which is why I'm calling. Because, David, I've known you since you were a nervous young man asking my permission to propose to my daughter. And the person Claire described, the one who'd orchestrate something so calculatedly cruel, that's not you. Maybe it is now. Or maybe you're hurt and lashing out, and you've convinced yourself that revenge is the same as justice. Her voice softened slightly. I'm not calling to take sides. I'm calling because I've been married for 42 years, and I've learned that the worst moments in a marriage are when both people are right about the other person's wrongdoing and completely blind to their own. She dismissed 7 years of support like it was nothing. I know. And you responded by trying to dismantle her entire life. You're both wrong, David. You're both hurt. And you're both so focused on making sure the other person understands your pain that you've forgotten you're supposed to be partners, not adversaries. What do you want me to do, Patricia? Just roll over? Pretend she didn't wound me? I want you to decide if being wounded gives you permission to be wounded back. I want you to consider that the person you're punishing is the same person who held your hand through your brother's funeral, who stayed up for 3 days helping you prepare for the biggest presentation of your career, who loves you, even if she's been terrible at showing it lately. Love isn't supposed to hurt like this. No, it's not, but it does sometimes. And when it does, you get to choose. Do you fight for healing or do you fight to win? She sighed. My daughter made a terrible mistake. She hurt you in a way that strikes at the core of how you see yourself. But David, your response has hurt her in ways that could take years to recover from. If you want this marriage to survive, someone has to be brave enough to stop the cycle of retaliation. After we hung up, I found myself pulling out the photo albums Claire and I kept in the living room bookshelf. Physical albums, the kind almost nobody makes anymore, filled with printed photos from our 7 years together. There we were at the beach where I proposed, both of us sunburned and grinning. At our wedding, dancing together while everyone watched. On our honeymoon in Italy, feeding each other gelato in front of the Trevi fountain. At the closing for this house, holding up the keys like prizes. Page after page of evidence that we'd been happy once. That we'd chosen each other deliberately and built something that mattered. That before the careers and the stress and the slow erosion of gratitude, we'd been two people who believed their love could weather anything. When had that stopped being true, or had it always been true, and we'd just forgotten how to access it? My phone buzzed, a text from Claire. I know you're probably not ready to talk, but I wanted you to know that I withdrew the restraining order request, called the detective this morning and told her I overreacted. The police report still exists, but there won't be a hearing on Tuesday. I don't want to force you into anything. I just want you to choose us because you want to, not because a judge ordered it. I stared at that message for a long time. She'd withdrawn the order, had given up her legal protection, her paper trail, her documentation of my wrongdoing, had made herself vulnerable again, even after I demonstrated exactly how much damage I was willing to cause. That took courage, or desperation, or maybe both. I thought about my mother's boxes, packed and then unpacked, about my father's tears and his Zah's choice to let pride fall away in favor of love, about Patricia's question, did I want to be wounded or did I want to be married? I thought about the Meridian deal that would close tomorrow, about the bonus that would be mine alone, about the apartment I could afford easily now that I wasn't carrying Claire's debt, about the future I could build, successful and solitary and completely free from the complications of partnership. And I thought about Claire's feet in my lap while she read case files, about the way she laughed at my terrible puns, about the morning I'd found her crying in the shower after a particularly brutal day, and I'd climbed in fully clothed just to hold her, about the 1,000 small moments of intimacy that make up a marriage, the ones you don't realize matter until they're gone. I picked up my phone, typed a response. Thank you for withdrawing the order. Can we talk? Not to fight, just to talk. Today, if you're willing. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. Jennifer's place, 2 p.m. I'll make sure we're alone. I'll be there. I spent the next 3 hours in a strange fugue state, simultaneously preparing for the conversation and avoiding thinking about it. Showered, dressed in jeans and the sweater Claire had bought me last Christmas. The one she said made my eyes look impossibly blue. Made sure I looked like someone worth fighting for, or at least someone who was trying. At 1:45, I got in my car and drove through rain to Jennifer Wu's apartment in Silver Lake, parked outside the converted warehouse that housed young attorneys and artists and people who were still convinced that Los Angeles was a place where dreams came true. Claire opened the door before I could knock. She looked smaller somehow, dressed in yoga pants and an old college sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. No makeup, no armor, just Claire, stripped of all the professional polish that usually defined her. Hi, she said quietly. Hi. Come in, I made coffee, the kind you like with the, cinnamon, yeah. I followed her into Jennifer's apartment, neutral territory for a conversation that felt anything but neutral. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, careful not to touch, the space between us measured and meaningful. The coffee sat on the table, untouched, while we studied each other like people trying to recognize someone they used to know. I don't know how to start, Claire said finally. Me neither. Okay, then I'll just say what I need to say, and you can respond however you need to. She took a breath. I've been thinking about what I said at dinner, about the settling comment, and I need you to understand that it wasn't about you being inadequate. It was about me being terrified. Terrified of what? Of being seen as someone who needs help, someone who didn't earn her success alone, someone who's only impressive because she had support. She pulled her knees to her chest. My whole career, I've watched women get dismissed because they're married, called less committed because they have families. passed over for opportunities because managing partners assume they'll prioritize home over work. And I've watched men get praised for the exact same choices. So you decided to hide me. I decided to protect myself. But in doing that, I hurt you. And that was inexcusable. The coffee was getting cold between us. The rain had intensified, drumming against Jennifer's windows with increasing urgency, and I realized we were finally having the conversation we should have had a week ago, before envelopes and police reports and all the ways we'd learned to wound each other. The question was, had we learned it too late? I need to tell you something, I said, breaking the silence that had settled between us like sediment. Something I should have told you days ago instead of what I did. Claire nodded, still hugging her knees, waiting. The vulnerability in her posture, so different from the polished professional I'd been married to, made what I had to say both easier and infinitely harder. When you said that being called your wife made you look like you settled, it wasn't just that comment that hurt. It was that the comment confirmed everything I'd been afraid of for months, that I wasn't enough, that all the support I'd given you, all the sacrifices I'd made, they didn't matter because I wasn't impressive enough, successful enough, important enough to be worth acknowledging. David, let me finish, please. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, staring at the cold coffee. I spent 7 years building a foundation for us. For you, really, if I'm being honest. I co-signed mortgages I couldn't afford alone. I worked extra hours to cover your student loan payments when money was tight. I turned down a position in New York because you just made senior associate and couldn't relocate. And I did all of it gladly, Claire. I did it because I loved you and because I believed we were building something together. Were we? Because somewhere along the way, it started feeling like I was building something for you, and you were just living in it, eating it, benefiting from it without acknowledging it existed. I looked up at her. Do you know how invisible that makes someone feel? To be essential but unacknowledged? To be the infrastructure everyone uses but nobody sees? Tears were streaming down her face now, silent and steady. I saw you. I always saw you. Then why did it feel like you were trying to erase me? Because I'm an idiot. She laughed, bitter and broken. Because I got so caught up in trying to be invincible that I forgot the person who made that possible. Because the legal world I live in punishes any hint of dependence. So I convinced myself that acknowledging your support was the same as admitting weakness. My support wasn't weakness, Claire. It was love. I know that now. God, I know that now. She unfolded herself, moved closer on the couch, still leaving space between us, but reducing the distance. David, when I opened that envelope on Saturday, when I saw all those numbers laid out, every dollar you'd contributed, every obligation you'd carried, every way you'd propped up my life, I felt like I'd been living in a house I didn't know you'd built. And the shame of that, the humiliation of realizing how much I'd taken for granted. She wiped at her eyes. That's what destroyed me, not the financial implications, the moral ones. I wanted you to feel that shame. I wanted you to understand what you'd been dismissing. Mission accomplished. I understand completely, painfully, in ways that will probably take me years to process. She pulled a throw pillow into her lap, something to hold. But David, what you did, engineering that public humiliation, watching me break down, systematically dismantling my financial security, that wasn't about helping me understand. That was about making me suffer. I know. Do you? Because I need you to really hear this. What you did was cruel, calculated and cruel. And I don't know how to reconcile the man who would do that with the man I married. The one who held me when I cried, who made me laugh when I was stressed, who made me believe that love could be soft and safe. I don't know how to reconcile him either. I met her eyes. I've spent the last 2 days trying to figure out who I became, trying to justify it by saying I was hurt. I was defending myself. I was teaching you a lesson. But the truth is simpler than that. I wanted you to hurt the way I hurt. And that's not love. That's not even justice. That's just cruelty dressed up in righteousness. The rain had softened to a steady whisper against the windows. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing piano. Chopin, I thought. though I'd never been good at identifying classical pieces. The music drifted through the walls like a ghost of more cultured lives. My mother came by this morning, I said, told me about a time when my father punished her for months over a decision she'd made. How she almost left him because living with someone who weaponized hurt was worse than living alone. What stopped her? He chose humility over pride, admitted he was wrong, helped her unpack the boxes she'd packed to leave. I turned to face her fully now. Claire, I don't want to be the person who makes you pack boxes. I don't want to be the person whose hurt becomes more important than our future. But I also don't know how to just forgive and forget and go back to normal when normal was what got us here. Normal is gone, she said simply. We can't go back to it. We can only go forward to something different, something where we're both honest about needs and resentments before they become weapons. What would that look like? She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Claire had always been methodical, even in emotion, perhaps especially in emotion. It was what made her a good attorney, and maybe I was beginning to see what made intimacy difficult for her. Everything analyzed, strategized, defended against. It looks like therapy, she said finally. Both of us, individually and together. Because we're both broken in ways that marriage didn't break us. We brought these fractures into the relationship, and now they're cracking the foundation. You think I'm broken? I think you've spent so long being the dependable one, the supportive one, the one who carries everyone else's weight, that you forgot how to ask for support yourself. And when you finally did ask, even indirectly, even through hurt, and got dismissed, you didn't know what to do with that pain except weaponize it. She set the pillow aside, leaned forward. I think you're terrified of being invisible, of mattering less, of all that sacrifice being for nothing. And instead of telling me that fear, you tried to prove it by removing yourself and watching me collapse. The accuracy of that assessment felt like being x-rayed, exposed, every hidden fracture made visible. And you, I almost asked, what are you broken in? I'm terrified of being ordinary, of being one more woman who's only successful because a man propped her up, of needing anything from anyone because needing means owing, and owing means losing power. She smiled sadly. I've been playing a zero-sum game in our marriage, treating every acknowledgement of your support as an admission of my inadequacy. And that's not just broken. That's toxic. So we're both disasters. Apparently, but we're decanners who still love each other, which has to count for something. Does it? Is love enough to overcome this much damage? I don't know, Damo, but I know that not trying is the one thing I'll regret forever. She reached out tentatively, her hand hovering in the space between us, an offering, a question. David, I can't undo what I said. I can't erase the hurt I caused or take back the ways I dismissed you, but I can acknowledge it. I can work to understand why I did it. I can commit to being different, if you're willing to do the same. I looked at her hand, at the engagement ring she was still wearing, the one I'd bought 7 years ago after saving for 6 months, certain then that this woman was worth any sacrifice. At the wedding band that matched mine, the simple platinum circles we'd chosen together, because we'd wanted something that would last. All those symbols of commitment, still present, while the commitment itself had nearly shattered. I need you to know what withdrawing from those obligations would have done to you, I said, not taking her hand yet, needing her to understand the full scope before deciding if we could move forward. The house would have gone into foreclosure within 90 days. Your credit score would have dropped by 200 points. You would have lost the car. The investment property would have been seized. You would have been effectively financially ruined for years, maybe a decade. I know. And I was willing to do that to you, to watch it happen, to feel vindicated while you lost everything. I know, she said again, and that terrifies me, not because of the financial implications, but because it means you're capable of that level of calculated harm when you're hurt. And I don't know how to trust someone who's shown me they're capable of destroying me. How do I learn to trust someone who's shown me she's ashamed to be associated with me? We sat with those questions, the fundamental paradox of trying to rebuild after demonstrating mutual capacity for devastation. How do you trust someone who's proven they can hurt you? How do you love someone who's shown you their willingness to wound? Maybe we don't trust, Claire said slowly. Not immediately. Maybe we just commit to transparency, to saying the hard things before they become weapons, to admitting when we're hurt instead of collecting evidence. That sounds exhausting. Probably, but less exhausting than divorce lawyers and asset division and co-parenting a life we used to share. We don't have kids. No, but we have 7 years of history. We have inside jokes and shared memories and 1,000 small intimacies that only we understand. We have the life we built, even if the foundation needs reinforcing. She moved her hand closer. We have the choice to fight for this or walk away. And David, I want to fight. Even though I'm scared, even though I don't know if we can fix this, I want to treat. I thought about the Meridian deal that would close tomorrow, about the promotion I'd probably get, about the life I could build alone, successful, unencumbered, safe from the vulnerability that made intimacy possible. And I thought about what that life would feel like. The empty house, the victories with no one to share them, the slow realization that safety from hurt also meant safety from joy, and that a life protected from pain was also protected from meaning. I called James Corrigan yesterday, I said, told him to halt the removal process. The paperwork hasn't been finalized yet, so my name stays on everything. For now. Claire's breath caught. You did? I did. Not because I decided to stay, but because I realized that destroying your life wasn't actually making me feel better. It was just making me feel like someone I didn't recognize. I finally took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers were, how they trembled slightly at the contact. But Claire, I need things to change, really change. Not just words about being better. Actual, concrete, uncomfortable change. What kind of change? Therapy, like you said, both of us, weekly, minimum, and couples counseling with someone who specializes in rebuilding trust after betrayal. Okay. And you need to tell your firm about us. Really tell them. Introduce me as your husband, at events, in conversations, on your goddamn email signature if you have to, because I can't be married to someone who treats me like a secret or a liability. That's fair. And I need to work on asking for what I need instead of keeping score silently and then exploding when the score gets too lopsided. I need to learn that asking for support isn't weakness or burden, that being vulnerable isn't the same as being invisible. Also fair. And we need to figure out our finances, really figure them out. Not my money and your money and joint obligations we're both resenting, but a structure that feels equitable and acknowledged, where contributions are visible and appreciated, not invisible and assumed. She nodded, still holding my hand. I can agree to all of that, but David, I need something too. What? I need you to promise that if you're hurt, you tell me, before it becomes rage, before it becomes revenge, before you start engineering elaborate punishments disguised as lessons. Her grip tightened. I need to know that the man I'm married to won't try to destroy me again, even if I hurt him, even if I deserve it. I can't promise I won't hurt you. People hurt each other. That's part of intimacy. I'm not asking you to never hurt me. I'm asking you to never intentionally devastate me. There's a difference. I thought about the envelope, about watching her face crumble through a coffee shop window, about the satisfaction I'd expected to feel and the hollow shame that had come instead. I promise, I said, no more calculated devastation, no more revenge disguised as justice. If I'm hurt, I say so. If I'm angry, I say so. If I'm scared of being invisible, I say so before I prove it by disappearing. And if I'm ashamed or scared or struggling with acknowledging dependence, I say so before I make you feel erased. She pulled my hand to her chest, holding it there over her heart. David, I know I don't deserve another chance. I know what I said was unforgivable, but I'm asking for forgiveness anyway. Not because I've earned it, but because we've built something that's worth saving. And I don't want to lose you over my inability to admit I needed you. I don't want to lose you either, even though part of me wants to, even though it would be easier. Nothing worth having is easy. That's a terrible platitude. It is, but it's also true. She smiled slightly, the first real smile I'd seen from her in days. Are we doing this? Really trying? Not just talking about trying, but committing to the work and the discomfort and all the ways it's going to suck before it gets better? I pulled her closer, eliminating the careful distance we'd maintained. She came willingly, folding into me the way she used to when we were young and everything was possible, and love felt like protection rather than risk. We're doing this, I said into her hair. But Claire, if we're going to do this, we're doing it honestly, completely honestly. Even when the honesty hurts, especially when the honesty hurts. Agreed. Radical honesty. Uncomfortable transparency. Admitting needs and fears and resentments before they become weapons. Starting now? Starting now. She pulled back to look at me. Then I'll start. I'm terrified that even with therapy and commitment and all the work we're promising to do, we'll just end up here again. That I'll hurt you without meaning to, or you'll punish me for it, and we'll spiral back into devastation. I'm terrified we're too broken to fix. The honesty of that, the raw admission of doubt even in the moment of choosing to try, somehow made the trying feel more possible. Not because the fear was gone, but because it was acknowledged. I'm terrified of the same thing, I admitted, and I'm terrified that I'll never feel secure enough in your love to stop waiting for the other shoe to drop. That every time you introduce me to colleagues, I'll be analyzing whether you said husband with pride or reluctance. That I've poisoned my own ability to trust you by imagining all the ways you might hurt me. So we're both terrified. Apparently. But we're trying anyway? Yeah, we're trying anyway. Outside, the rain had stopped. The late afternoon sun broke through clouds, painting Jennifer's apartment in shades of gold and amber. And for the first time in days, the light didn't feel like an accusation. Just light. Just the ordinary miracle of weather changing, of storms passing, of day continuing, despite everything. We sat there holding each other while the sun moved across the walls, not talking, just existing in the same space without defense or distance. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. It wasn't even healing. But it was a start, and sometimes a start is enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that follows storms, everything sharper, colors more vivid, the city scrubbed clean and gleaming under a sky that had remembered how to be blue. I woke in our bedroom. Not the guest room, our room, with Claire sleeping beside me, her breathing steady and even. One hand curled near her face in that gesture of vulnerability that sleep permits. We'd come home together last night from Jennifer's apartment, had walked through the front door holding hands like teenagers, uncertain but committed. We hadn't made love, hadn't even really touched beyond the holding, just existed in the same space, talking until past midnight about logistics and fears in the shape of what trying might actually look like in practice. First therapy appointment by end of week, she'd said, making notes on her phone like she was preparing for trial. Individual sessions for both of us, plus we need to find a couples counselor who specializes in betrayal recovery. Betrayal recovery, I'd repeated. Is that what we're doing? We've betrayed each other's trust in different ways. You with the financial devastation, me with the casual dismissal of your worth. So yeah, betrayal recovery. She looked up from her phone. Unless you have a better term? Marriage reconstruction? Too sterile? Relationship repair? Too vague? Learning not to be assholes to each other? I'd laughed at that, the first genuine laugh I'd managed in days. That works. Now, watching her sleep in the morning light, I felt the weight of what we'd committed to. This wasn't going to be a few therapy sessions and a tearful reconciliation. This was going to be months, maybe years, of uncomfortable honesty, of catching ourselves in old patterns and choosing different responses, of building new infrastructure while the old foundation was still settling. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. James Corrigan, texting at 7 a.m. because apparently all attorneys existed in a time zone where normal hours were merely suggestions. David, confirming you want to halt all removal proceedings? The bank needs final confirmation today, or the paperwork processes automatically tomorrow. I looked at Claire sleeping beside me, thought about the choice I was making, not just to stay, but to recommit. To restore my name to obligations I'd spent a week trying to escape. To choose vulnerability over safety, partnership over independence. Halt everything. Keep my name on all accounts. Send me revised documentation showing continued co-senior status. Confirmed. You're sure about this? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's either very brave or very stupid. Either way, it's done. Good luck, David. Claire stirred beside me, eyes opening slowly, taking a moment to orient herself. When she saw me, recognition and relief crossed her face in quick succession, like she'd been afraid she'd wake up and discover yesterday had been a dream. Hi, she said, her voice rough with sleep. Hi, you're really here. I'm really here. She rolled toward me, closing the distance between us on the mattress. I was afraid I'd wake up and you'd be gone, that you'd have changed your mind overnight. I almost did, about 6 times. Then I remembered that changing my mind doesn't actually solve anything. It just postpones the decision. Very philosophical for 7 in the morning. I've been awake since 5. She reached out, traced a finger along my jaw. Thinking about what? About what happens today. I closed the Meridian deal this morning. It'll be official by noon. The biggest deal of my career. The one that'll probably make me partner. And instead of celebrating, I'll be thinking about whether we're going to make it through this. We'll make it through this. You sound certain. I'm not, but I'm committed. There's a difference. She propped herself up on one elbow. David, I did something yesterday after you left Jennifer's. Something I should tell you about. My stomach tightened. What? I sent an email to the senior partners at my firm, told them I needed to take a step back from new cases for the next few months. That I was dealing with personal issues that required my attention, and I couldn't give clients the focus they deserved while I was splitting my attention. Claire, your career will survive me being human for a few months. Or it won't, and I'll find out whether the firm values me as a person or just as a billing machine. She sat up fully now, pulling the sheet around her. I've spent 7 years prioritizing career over everything else. Over you, over us, over my own well-being. And look where it got us. You planning my financial destruction and me having a breakdown over brunch. Something has to change, and it has to start with me choosing differently. What did they say? Catherine called me within an hour, said she understood that everyone needs to recalibrate sometimes, that they'd redistribute my active cases but keep me on the partnership track. She smiled slightly. Then she said something that stuck with me. She said, Claire, the law will always be here. Make sure your marriage is too. Catherine said that? Catherine Work-as-Life Morrison? She's been married 3 times. Apparently she's learned a few things about priorities. Claire pulled her knees to her chest. The point is I'm making space. For therapy, for us, for the actual work of fixing what's broken. And yes, it terrifies me professionally, but losing you terrifies me more. We sat in silence for a moment, letting that admission settle. Then I told her about James's text, about my decision to restore my name to all the accounts, about the choice to recommit rather than retreat. Thank you, she said quietly, for choosing to stay, for not letting my mistakes destroy us completely. Thank you for making space, for admitting you need help, for being brave enough to prioritize this. We're very polite for 2 people who were trying to destroy each other last week. Politeness is probably good practice, beats the alternative. She laughed and the sound felt like oxygen after drowning. God, we're such a mess. The messiest. But we're trying. We're trying. The Meridian closing happened at 10 a.m. in a conference room full of attorneys and executives and enough paperwork to deforest a small nation. I signed documents, shook hands, accepted congratulations from colleagues who had no idea that while I was securing the biggest professional win of my career, I was simultaneously trying to prevent my personal life from complete implosion. Drinks tonight to celebrate? My colleague Marcus offered as we left the conference room. We should toast properly. This deal's going to change your trajectory. Can't tonight, have plans. Tomorrow then? Maybe, I'll let you know. He studied me with the assessing gaze of someone who'd worked alongside me for 5 years. Everything okay, David? You seem off. Just processing. Big day. Big day deserves big celebration. Don't let it pass without marking it. But the celebration I needed wasn't champagne and steakhouses. It was going home to my wife and telling her about the win and having her understand what it meant. Having her be proud. Having the achievement mean something because it was shared. I left the office at noon, drove home through lunch hour traffic, and found Claire in the kitchen making sandwiches with the focused concentration she brought to everything. "You're home early," she said, looking up. "How'd it go?" "It's done. Signed, sealed, official. Meridian is ours." She set down the knife, came around the counter, pulled me into a hug that felt like coming home after years away. "I'm so proud of you. I know how hard you're working for this. How many hours, how much stress. This is huge, David." And there it was, the acknowledgement I'd been missing, the pride, the recognition that my work mattered, that my achievements were worth celebrating, that I was impressive in my own right. "Thank you," I said into her hair, "for saying that, for meaning it. I've always been proud of you. I've just been terrible at showing it, at letting you know that your success matters to me, that I see the work you put in." She pulled back to look at me. "But I'm going to get better at that, at acknowledging, at celebrating, at making sure you know that you matter." "I made us lunch," she continued, gesturing at the counter. "Nothing fancy, just sandwiches. But I figured we should eat together. Actually sit down and eat, not just grab food between obligations." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she'd told me being called her husband made her look settled, and ate sandwiches and talked about the Meridian deal and her decision to step back at work and the therapy appointments we'd scheduled for later in the week. Normal conversation, mundane, the kind of interaction that only seems significant when you've nearly lost the ability to have it. "First therapy session is Thursday," Claire said. "Dr. Helena Reeves. She specializes in high-achieving couples who've lost their way in career pressures." Seemed appropriate. "You already found someone?" "I called 6 therapists yesterday. She was the only one who could see us this week and had experience with our specific brand of dysfunction." She smiled slightly. "Apparently, successful people who've weaponized their success against each other is a whole category. Comforting to know we're not unique in our disaster. We're very accomplished at being disasters, though. Should probably add that to our resumes." After lunch, Claire went upstairs to work on case transition documents while I sat in my study, staring at the framed deal documents on my wall. Evidence of a successful career built while a marriage quietly crumbled. My phone rang. My father. "Heard the Meridian deal closed. Congratulations, son." "Thanks, Dad. How'd you know?" "Your mother called James Corrigan's wife. Small world." He paused. "Also heard you halted the removal proceedings, made a different choice." "Yeah, I'm either brave or stupid." "Probably both. The best decisions usually are." Another pause. "Your mother and I are proud of you, not just for the deal, for choosing to do the hard thing, for being willing to try." "I don't know if it'll work." "Nobody ever does. That's what makes it brave. You're trying anyway, even though you might fail, even though it would be easier to walk away." After we hung up, I thought about bravery, about how it wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it, about how choosing vulnerability required more courage than choosing safety, and how the most important battles were the ones fought not with weapons, but with willingness to be wounded. Claire appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs of tea. "Thought you might want some," she said. "It's the kind you like, the smoky one." Such a small gesture, such an ordinary kindness. But in the context of where we'd been, of envelopes and police reports and calculated cruelty, it felt revolutionary. We were learning, slowly, imperfectly, but we were learning, and maybe that was enough. 3 months later, I sat in Dr. Reeves's office on a Thursday afternoon, watching rain streak the windows in patterns that reminded me of that Saturday morning when everything had unraveled. Claire sat beside me on the familiar gray couch, our hands loosely intertwined. Not the desperate grip of people trying to hold something together, but the comfortable contact of people who learned they could let go and still come back. "So," Dr. Reeves said, setting down her notepad with a deliberate gesture That meant we were approaching the end of our session. 3 months. How are we feeling about the work we've done? Claire looked at me. I looked at her. We'd developed this habit of checking in silently before speaking, making sure we were aligned or at least aware of our misalignments. Better, Claire said finally. Not fixed, but better. Better is good, Dr. Reeves said. Better is sustainable. Fixed is a myth that sets people up for disappointment. She leaned back in her chair. David, what about you? I'm learning that marriage isn't about keeping score. It's about choosing to be on the same team even when the game gets ugly. I squeezed Claire's hand. And I'm learning that being vulnerable doesn't make me invisible. Sometimes it makes me more visible. That's significant growth from the man who engineered his wife's public humiliation 3 months ago. The words still stung, even though they were true, especially because they were true. I'm not proud of what I did, I said. I don't think I'll ever be proud of it, but I'm learning to forgive myself for being human, for being hurt and responding badly, for needing more than I was getting and not knowing how to ask for it without weaponizing the asking. Reeves nodded. And Claire, how are you managing the shame you've talked about? The sense that you'd built your life on a foundation you didn't acknowledge? I'm working on it. Some days are better than others. Claire shifted on the couch. I told my firm the full story last month about the financial entanglement, about David carrying so much of my debt, about how my independence was largely fictional. It was humiliating, but also liberating. How did they respond? Better than I expected. Catherine told me half the partners had similar arrangements with their spouses. That successful people supporting each other isn't weakness, it's strategy. She smiled slightly, though I think she also called me an idiot for almost throwing it away over pride. Were those her exact words? Her exact words were, Claire, you're brilliant in the courtroom and catastrophically stupid in your personal life. So essentially, yes. I laughed and it felt good, easy, the kind of laughter that comes from shared absurdity rather than shared pain. We're not perfect, I said to Dr. Reeves. We still fight. We still hurt each other sometimes. But we're fighting better. We're hurting each other less. And when we do hurt each other, we're talking about it instead of stockpiling evidence. That's the goal, Dr. Reeves said. Not perfection, just conscious partnership. Choosing each other repeatedly, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. After the session, Claire and I drove to the terrace, the scene of the crime as we started calling it. Mark had texted earlier in the week, inviting us to dinner, and after some discussion, we decided it was time to reclaim the space, to make new memories in a place that had held such painful ones. Mark greeted us at the door with his characteristic warmth and only minimal awkwardness. Table 7, he asked, eyebrows raised. Table 7, Claire confirmed. Time to exercise some demons. We sat at the same table where she'd opened the envelope, where her world had tilted, where I'd watched from across the street and felt satisfaction that had curdled almost immediately into shame. This is weird, Claire said, looking around. I keep expecting to see myself having a breakdown. If you do, we've got bigger problems than marriage issues. She laughed, then reached across the table to take my hand. David, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you months ago. My stomach tightened. Okay. When I opened that envelope, when I saw all those numbers, all that documentation of what you'd contributed, my first thought wasn't anger. It wasn't even hurt. It was clarity. She traced patterns on my palm. I thought, this is what love looks like when you are too stupid to see it. This is what partnership means when you're too proud to acknowledge it. And I realized that I'd spent 7 years taking for granted the most generous thing anyone had ever done for me, which was believing in me enough to bet on my success, putting your name on the line, your credit, your financial security, all because you thought I was worth the risk. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Nobody had ever done that for me before. My parents couldn't afford to help with school. I had to fight for every scholarship, every opportunity. And then you came along and just supported me without conditions, without keeping score, just because you loved me. I did love you. I do love you. I know, and I loved you too. I just forgot to show it. Forgot that love without acknowledgement is just taking. And I took and took until you finally said, enough. She wiped at her eyes. So thank you for the envelope. I mean it. Thank you for making me see what I was losing before I lost it completely. You're thanking me for orchestrating your public humiliation? I'm thanking you for loving me enough to fight for us, even if your method was catastrophically misguided. She smiled through tears. Though let's agree never to do that again. The fighting for us part is good. The public devastation part needs to stay retired. Deal. Mark appeared with wine, pretending not to notice Claire's tears. On the house. To celebrate whatever we're celebrating. Survival, I said. Growth, Claire added. Not killing each other, we said in unison. Mark laughed. I'll drink to that. Later at home, we stood in the kitchen where everything had started. The same kitchen, but different somehow. Or maybe we were different, and the kitchen was just a kitchen, innocent of all the drama we'd layered onto it. I have something for you, Claire said, pulling a folder from her bag. I've been working on this with my financial advisor. Inside was a detailed accounting of our shared assets, but reorganized. Every obligation clearly marked with the contribution percentages. Every account properly titled. Everything made visible and acknowledged. I wanted you to see it all, she said. Not hidden in joint statements or buried in paperwork, but clear, transparent, so you never again have to wonder if I understand what you've given us. I looked through the pages, saw my contributions recognized, saw her debts clearly labeled, saw the new structure we'd created, one where support was acknowledged, where partnership was documented, where nobody had to be invisible for the other to feel impressive. There's one more thing, she said, pulling out another document. I've been saving since we decided to try again, working extra hours, taking on freelance contract review. I have about $40,000 now. I want to use it to buy out some of your equity in the house. Not all of it. I can't afford that yet, but enough to make the contribution percentages more equal. To show you I'm investing too, that I'm all in. Claire, you don't have to. I want to. I need to. For me, not just for you. I need to know I'm building this life with you, not just living in a life you built for me. I looked at her, at this woman who'd hurt me and been hurt by me, who'd dismissed me and been publicly devastated by me, who'd stood at the edge of our marriage ending and chosen to fight instead of flee, and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness, exactly. We'd already done that work in therapy, in countless difficult conversations, in the slow rebuilding of trust through consistent action. What I felt was simpler. Gratitude for her courage, for her willingness to be uncomfortable, for her choice to invest in us even after I'd shown her exactly how much damage I was capable of inflicting. Okay, I said, let's do it. Equal partnership, visible contributions, no more invisible infrastructure. She kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Not the passionate kiss of new love, but something deeper. The kiss of people who'd survived each other's worst and chosen to stay anyway. 6 months after the envelope, Claire made senior partner. Her promotion was announced at the firm's annual gala, and when she took the stage to give her acceptance speech, I was there in the front row. I want to thank my husband, she said, her voice carrying across the ballroom. David Morrison, who has supported my career in ways both visible and invisible, who co-signed in my dreams when my credit couldn't, who believed in me when I was too proud to believe I needed anyone's belief, who showed me that partnership isn't weakness. It's the only way any of us accomplish anything worth accomplishing. The applause that followed was polite, appropriate, professional. But the look she gave me from that stage, that was just for us. An acknowledgement, a promise, a reminder that we'd chosen each other again and again. And we'd keep choosing each other through whatever came next. I never did figure out if what I did with that envelope was justice or revenge. Maybe it was both. Maybe it was neither. Maybe it was just a desperate man trying to be seen by the person who mattered most, using the only tools he had left when words had failed him. But I learned something important. Being right and being righteous aren't the same thing. You can be justified in your hurt and still be wrong in your response. You can demand acknowledgement and still be cruel in the demanding. Marriage isn't about who's right or who's wrong. It's about choosing every single day to be on the same side, to fight for each other instead of against each other, to make each other visible instead of invisible. Claire and I weren't perfect. We still fought, still hurt each other, still struggled with old patterns and new fears, but we were trying consistently, consciously, courageously, and sometimes trying is the bravest thing you can do. On our 8th anniversary, we went back to the beach where I'd proposed, stood in the same spot where I'd knelt 7 years earlier, both of us older and scarred and aware of exactly how fragile forever can be. If you could go back, Claire asked, would you do anything differently? I thought about the envelope, about the devastation, about all the ways we'd learned to wound each other before learning to heal. Everything, I said, and nothing. I'd choose you differently, better, kinder, but I'd still choose you. She leaned her head on my shoulder, and we stood there watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold. Amber. Amber. Two imperfect people who'd nearly destroyed each other and chosen to rebuild instead. The settlement I'd wanted was acknowledgement, recognition, visibility. What I'd learned was that settlement isn't something you demand. It's something you create, together. One choice at a time, one acknowledgement at a time, one act of courage at a time. We were still creating it, still learning, still choosing. And that, it turned out, was enough.